So welcome to all of our candidates, and welcome to our audience members. This is the third U.S. Transhumanist Party virtual debate in the presidential primary for President of the United States. And because we have had a significant increase, a threefold increase in the number of our candidates since the prior virtual debate, we have had to split our last debate into two segments. So this third virtual debate is the first of those segments. The fourth virtual debate, the second of those segments with the remaining four candidates, will occur on Tuesday, September 17th at 6:30 p.m. U.S. Pacific time. Today, I would appreciate all of your attention to our five candidates who are present. We have John Kerecz, we have Charles Holsopple, we have Rachel Haywire, we have Kimberly Forsythe, and we have Kristan T. Harris. And we have crowdsourced the questions for this debate from U.S. Transhumanist Party members. We have prepared 12 questions for our candidates to address. Each candidate will have 3 minutes per question, and we will have the opportunity to hear all of their perspectives. Some of these questions are oriented toward policy, some are oriented toward character and leadership. So without further ado, let us begin with our first question from our member Thomas James O'Carroll. Mr. O'Carroll asks, as a candidate for office and as President of the United States if elected, some of the outcomes you achieve will be based solely on the person that you are and the morals that you hold. Tell us about the person you believe yourself to be and why that strengthens the person who will be remembered by history during your presidency. Candidate John Kerecz, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Well, myself personally, I consider myself a caring person and to care about a lot of issues. I always try and think of things from the other people's side of view. So therefore, I don't just try and look at it from how my view is. I mean, you have different people in a situation. Say we have two parties that are arguing about a situation. I try to not only look at it from the view that I would have, but what I believe would be their view, and try and also learn what issues are affecting them to feel how they are. Like when we have issues within this country with other countries, trade issues, or also territory issues, you try and think of it from their point of view. How do they feel? What is their upbringing? I remember an interesting story one time I had heard about that, and they said how people are brought up makes a whole big difference on how they are viewed. Say you have an area where in that country it is accepted to be bold, and being bold and speaking your point of view and abruptly doing that is viewed to be how a person should be. And to that, they view that as a strong point. But then you come to another area, and in their view, people should be more passive and go along with what the elders say. Now, when you have one person from the more bold group go into the other group, and if he get a job or not, he might not get promoted because he's looked at being too aggressive. Or if the other person would go into the other group's area, he would not get promoted because he looks at being too passive and not being, willing to work enough. So it's an issue of where they come from and how it is viewed. So you have to always view the size of an issue from how they view it, not just from your own viewpoint. And that's just what I would bring to the office.
Thank you, candidate John Kerecz. And you had 1 minute and 10 seconds remaining that will carry over to your future time slots. Now, next, with regard to this question, is candidate Charles Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Tell us about the person you are and the morals you hold and how that will contribute to your presidency and how your presidency will be remembered.
Yes, I don't see myself on the video, but can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yes, I grew up with a passion for truth and justice, and there wasn't always that much of that ingredient around me in the decisions that were being made for the local community as I got more informed, for the global community. We weren't doing the best we can, and I've always had a passion for demonstrating how we all could get through the thread the needle, and where we could all get through and come into a more prosperous, peaceful society. And the traits that I have is I'm brutally honest. I try to be honest with myself as well as others, and I try to listen to all sides, as John was saying. And I'm a realist and an optimist at the same time. I realize that we have very serious existential threats that are throughout our society. And there are immense challenges ahead, and very much opportunity ahead for those alive today, and hopefully, if we do a good job, for those that follow us in future generations. I would love to say that I believe in solutions, not problems, and we need to ask the right questions in order to solve those issues that are pertain to us all. And I would like to bring unity to the situation once we have understanding. And I'm not the educator, but within the Transhumanist Party, we have a wide variety of platforms and issues that are pertaining to the scientific community, as well as we're trying to get that message into the broader base, the global community, the United States community, so that we can direct our efforts and our economy towards a more peaceful, prosperous society. And I'm all in on that. I have been for 15 years. I've been an activist. You could look at the globalshelterproject.blogspot.com. That'll show you some of my past writings and efforts with the University of Akron for housing and whatnot. I won't go back into what I've tried to do, but everything that I've tried to do has been for unity, for using technology to better serve humanity.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. And that leaves you with 5 seconds carried over to your future time segments. Now, next will be candidate Rachel Haywire. You have 3 minutes to answer the first question.
Hi, so people that watching this that are familiar with me, they know that I am a visionary. They know that I am a builder, a creator, an entrepreneur, an artist, and a tribalizer, somebody that brings like minds together to create new events, whether it's the Extreme Futures Festival, whether it's Instead, whether it's small gatherings of like-minded intellectuals discussing technology. I'm a person with a vision and a desire to make the creative world more intelligent and to make the tech world more creative. I have always advocated for a fusion of visionary technology and transgressive art, and I believe that that vision is the vision that the Transhumanist Party needs. My morals are about freedom of thought, about freedom of expression, and about freedom of the individual. I will always act in the interest of these principles, which I have never changed. I have supported freedom of thought since I was a mental health activist, since I had my site trigger warning, since from all the way back in the day, I spoke out against what I thought was wrong and did what I felt was right, regardless of views or who was in power or whatever was the narrative of the day. I fought for freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of the individual. And I will continue to do these things.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You also have 70 seconds that will be carried over to your subsequent speaking segments. Next will be candidate Kimberly Forsythe. Candidate Forsythe, you have 3 minutes to answer the first question.
Well, I consider myself a very caring person as well. I do strive to help as much as I can to alleviate some of the world's problems. One of the things that really can get to me is when I see people suffering. And it is something that I do believe that collectively we can all change. I have stated very prominently in the Facebook group that I do not consider myself a leader because I do not want to encourage more followers. I want to encourage people to lead themselves, to proactively solve problems, not just react to them. One of the things that I really love about myself is that I try not to be fearful in anything that I do. I enjoy exploring, not only traveling, but also exploring new avenues for solutions to problems, listening to other people, trying to understand their perspectives as best as I can. And basically, I just want to see a more unified, more equitable world.
Thank you, Candidate Forsythe. We have you at 95 seconds to be carried over to your subsequent time segments. And finally, for the first question, Candidate Kristan T. Harris, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Well, first of all, I want to say, isn't it amazing to share a platform with so many brilliant minds? It's a wonderful opportunity for each and every one of us to work together and understand different viewpoints on things. I think that quite honestly, the things that separate me or put me above and beyond is my ability of honesty and integrity, the ability to inspire others, I've developed many activist groups that have gone on to do other things, including things like podcasting, like you mentioned. But we're talking about grassroots, on the ground type things. Obviously, I'm a good communicator, decision-making capabilities, accountability. All those things are really important when you're running for president. Obviously, loyalty. Those are all things that I'm really dedicated on. Educating other individuals on things like transhumanism, being able to bridge the gap between, let's say, the conservative ideology and transhumanism, and maybe and kind of bring more of a centric viewpoint on things and bring different alternative viewpoints. What makes me a good leader? I think those are all different things, concoctions, an alchemy of success, planning, delegation, empowerment. Those are all different things. Creativity, all those things are things that may put me above and beyond some of the other candidates. I think we have a great group of candidates. We each have our own abilities and different ways we impact things. Rachel with art. We got obviously Kim here with the health aspect of things. We got John with ideology of liberties. I mean, we bring so much as a group, but as an individual, I believe that's how I can contribute.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. And we have you at 80 seconds carried over to your subsequent speaking slots. Thank you to all of you for your eloquent answers to our first question. Now we proceed to our second question from Denora Delphine, who is our Director of Admissions and Public Relations for the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And she also has a question about leadership. She asks, what do you think people want in a good leader, which may not necessarily be what you think makes a good leader? So please focus your answers on what you believe people in general or most people consider to be good leadership. Even if you don't consider yourself to be a leader, I think you can opine as to what the public would consider to be a good leader. So candidate John Kerecz, I will give you the floor for 3 minutes.
I think above all, usually people want you to be fair and honest. But beyond fair and honest, I think sometimes you see leaders go in a direction you might not see as quite as right, but you don't want a leader to be wavering in his own commitment to something. So therefore, if the leader makes a decision and say he's going to go in a certain direction, I think the people want to see him strong and behind his own views. and not waver on it. Because I think if he doesn't have direction or seem to have belief in himself or his own direction, that the people also will not follow him. So I think fair and honest above everything else, but then if you go in a direction, you have to stick with it. You have to be committed to what you say you're going to do. You can't waver. And I think that's the main thing that people want in a leader.
Yes, thank you, candidate Kerecz. And we will add 130 seconds to your future speaking slots. Next, candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes to discuss what you think people want in a leader.
Well, I think in this time, a lot of people want in a leader to justify their beliefs, whether they be right or wrong. It goes back to tribalism. So that is not a quality that I think we need to promote. Is just reinforcing someone's beliefs on a tribal side. But I think we need, as a leader, we need to address the people's need for their security and their protection. I think people want to feel secure in both their present situation and the future of themselves and their future generations, their children. So the qualities in a leader, besides honesty and integrity, has to be imagination and inspiration. Something that makes the picture more clear to them, something that makes people relate to a something bigger than themselves, and something that makes sense from a technological and scientific inclusion of them into this brave new world that we're entering into. Something that includes them and gives them a path to reach their dreams and their fulfill their hopes. So I think a leader needs to inspire, and it needs to explain and really interpret some of the false beliefs that people have, the tribalism. I think it requires a delicate hand to confront some of the false beliefs that so much and so many people in power have. And I think it takes a strong hand to do that, and it takes a very informed mind and cabinet, not just one person, but it takes a movement. And that's where I hope that the Transhumanist Party starts to set those issues into the conversation. And through this exercise, this educational exercise of running for president, that's what I hope to bring to the conversation, is a open discussion of science and the ethical values, the philosophy, and the physics of what we're actually faced with today.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will carry over 30 seconds to your subsequent speaking slots. Next, we have candidate Rachel Haywire. In 3 minutes, what do you think people want in a good leader?
People want a leader that moves them. People want a leader that inspires them. People want a leader that makes them want to take action. A leader leads, and people want a leader to move them in an inspiring way. People want inspiring leaders because leaders that inspire people move people, and leaders move people. That is what leaders do. Now, not everybody wants the same type of leader. But if you're out there looking for a leader, you're going to want a leader that inspires you, a leader that you can relate to, a leader that you feel that you can sit down with and talk to. And you're going to want a leader that knows that your concerns are understood, that isn't going to talk down to you, that's going to be real with you, that's going to go against corruption, even if that's not the popular thing to do. People want leaders who they can trust and rely on, and leaders that know what is going on and are not afraid to discuss it, even if it's difficult. Moving leaders people want leaders that move them.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 90 seconds, so we'll carry 90 seconds over to your future speaking slots. Now, candidate Kimberly Forsythe, you have 3 minutes to discuss what you think people want in a good leader.
Well, I believe that a lot of people want, as John and Charles have mentioned, several of those qualities. In addition, they want humility. Rachel pointed out very well, they want somebody who is real, who can relate to them on their level. And inspire them, and that is absolutely true. I do feel like in current times, most leaders just do a lot of lip service and tell people what they want to hear. But I don't believe that that should be a good quality of a leader or anybody who's seeking any type of leadership position. It is time that we start to really demand truth, demand transparency, and demand leaders who take responsibility for when things don't go exactly as planned, not who seek to blame somebody else. And in these days, we just seem to have too many people who just want to shirk off the responsibility and blame others. And it's not a quality that should be in contemporary politics or anything else. Got to remember, it's 3:30 in the morning for me here, so I'm trying. But that's it.
All right. Thank you, candidate Forsythe. We will carry over 100 seconds to your subsequent speaking thoughts. And finally, for question number 2, candidate Kerecz, what do you believe people want in a good leader?
I think that the biggest thing is to listen to the people that in tough decisions making. What comes down to is what is the right decision to make. So tough decision making, but you can't do that without fielding information from the general public, because I think that a president or any one figurehead is the smartest person, very naive. So I think a lot of times we need to listen to our constituents. We have a lot of great people out there that are way smarter than I am, all about what you do with information and how you implement it. And sometimes the right decision isn't the popular decision. So being able to control the outcome of that, because not everything is always happening and very lovey-dovey. We do have tough decisions to make such a decision.
Candidate Harris, if I may, your sound has cut off, so I'm going to stop the clock for a moment. If you could repeat about the last 20 seconds of your remarks and perhaps configure any settings on your microphone that may be suboptimal.
Let me give this. This is better. All right, so you guys aren't getting me over there, huh?
That's better.
This is better.
Okay, so I apologize about that. But I believe that tough decision making is something that isn't always appealing to everyone. It may be the right decision, but it might not be the popular decision. And I think that going to the and getting information and ideas other than just one person, the idea that one person is all intelligent and has the ability to lead us all perfectly is very unlikely, at least currently. We'll see what happens with AI down the road. I know there's a lot of opportunity there. But the idea is we should really be reaching out to our constituents to get a better viewpoint. There's a lot of people out there that are a lot smarter than I am. I'm going to be honest with you. There's people that are smarter than the president we have now. The question is how do we bring in those abilities, harness it, and get the best outcome and be able to make those tough decisions. And when those decisions are needed to be made, think about something as controversial as, let's say, vaccination. Do you have the right to put what's in your body or not? That's a tough decision. What's right or not? Some people say it's a herd mentality. Some people say it's my body. I can put in it what I want. These are kind of decisions and communication and viewpoints that affect politics. Obviously, Congress and Senate, they're the real kingmakers and decision makers. You're more of a figurehead, but it's important because obviously honesty, integrity as a president, you take a lot of heat. So.
Thank you, candidate Harris. You spoke for 2 minutes in terms of substance, so we'll add 60 seconds to your future speaking times. And that was our second question. So we proceed now to the third question from our member, Tanvir Ahmed. And he asks, what can you do to keep us alive forever? And this is the transhumanist variant of the question, what's in it for me? So, candidate John Kerecz, you have the floor for 3 minutes. What can you do to keep us alive?
Well, first off, one of the main points I wanted to stress, I was thinking of 3 points as far as my platform, is health. And I think, first off, to look at longevity is to look at longevity as total health. So first off, you have to improve the health of everybody. So I think first we have to revamp our healthcare in the United States, in this country, and hopefully then also in the world. But first off, it's just making sure people live longer and don't die of diseases that they have always died of in the past. Today already our lifespan has been expanding. So the first off is to help do research to cure normal ailments and to also improve longevity. I myself have researched longevity since the 70s. I was a follower of Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, if you remember their longevity books from the 70s. I see Charles remembers the books. I still buy things off of them today. But it doesn't always have to be man and machine necessarily as far as improving our health period. I myself have 11 fake parts in me presently. I've had pieces of my eyes have been replaced. Parts of my leg have been replaced. I have a fake hip. I have titanium. I have screws in me. It's the way to go to keep us active and keep us alive. I think so. First off, we have to improve total health care. And then to new technologies, not keep them from the people, but make them accessible. Enable testing of things also. Of course, there is rights to how you should test new things, but we should be able to test new ideas and not be afraid of testing so that things are available to people and we can progress. I also, in my own opinion, I'm a very big backer of the space program, and I think this does relate because people forget how when we're worried about people going to space and dealing in different atmospheres and different situations, how we also have to research other health issues. I believe those same health issues that we're going to research for traveling to space is also going to increase our longevity here on Earth also, because we have to learn how to adapt our human body to different atmospheres and different gravities. So basically, in the beginning of it, I think just the basic increase of paying more attention to healthcare in this country, making sure healthcare is available to everybody, and then increasing the level of what people can get and not just limiting it to the natural things. And I was talking to a doctor today about how some drugs and stuff that they push in this country are based more on making money instead of actually helping people's life. And I like to make sure that it's more about extending people's life and not the companies making money.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. You spoke essentially for the 3-minute time period. So now we will move to Candidate Holsopple. Before we do, I would ask any candidate that's typing to mute themselves while they are typing and another candidate is speaking, and then unmute themselves when it is time for them to speak. So Candidate Holsopple, with that, you have 3 minutes to address Mr. Ahmed's question. What can you do to keep us alive forever?
Well, what my goal would be is to keep as many of us alive for as long a period as possible so that we had an opportunity to experience the hopes and dreams of living a full and healthy life. I can't say that I'm going to promote any one faction of transhumanism in order for that to make a magic pill to where we can live forever. I think there's people within the Transhumanist Party and outside the Transhumanist Party that are working on those life extension sciences that are receiving. Rachel, if you would mute your keyboard while you type, like you said. So I think that the amount of money that we spend, the amount of really compassion that we spend. I mean, we all have a limited amount of attention span to take care of others and really just take care of ourselves. We get caught up in the day-to-day life of what is required for us economically and socially. I think extending the life of each individual has a lot to do with the quality of the life while we're on this planet. I think extending our life would be extending our legacy and through our genetics, helping to create a better world given time. Nothing's going to happen immediately when we are not thinking along the same line and allowing change to take place. We have to open up the possibilities of long life and working towards the common good to extend our health and our wellness and our economy. It all goes into the same bin of how much satisfaction do we get back from our institutions and our government and our own lives, and what can we contribute and what do we get back in real and meaningful ways. So I can't do anything to extend the life of anybody individually, but I would promote those sciences that promoted the health and well-being of society as a whole, as well as the individual.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You will have 27 seconds carried over to your subsequent speaking times. Now, Candidate Rachel Haywire, in 3 minutes, what can you do to keep us alive forever?
I want to keep everybody alive forever, regardless of their economic status or their social status, their credentialism. Transhumanism is for all, and part of my platform is about making life extension available to all human beings. And right now, there are a lot of life extension technologies that are only available to people that have a certain amount of money. And I don't like to see that. I mean, a good friend of mine died recently. He was a crypto engineer, a genius. He was building a new form of AI. And we talked about pretty much everything related to high-end, highly insane transhumanism, my favorite kind, visionary technology, I call it. And he died during my campaign, and he didn't have that much money. He wasn't super poor or anything, but I was thinking about what if he had access to better technology for life extension, for medical in general, and what if all people, like my friend James, and all people in the gig economy, in the art class, even homeless people on the street, people that are struggling and suffering just to eat their next meal, what if they had access to life extension technology too? So I would talk to people working on life extension, whether it's cryonics. I would advocate for subsidizing it to give cryonics to everybody. And I would talk to people that were working on regenerative medicine and make sure that we had options available through medical insurance on the blockchain. We would come up with ways to make sure that everybody, regardless of their economic status, had life extension access. We are all on the way to having life extension before us. And what I would do was make sure that it was all of us that were getting kept alive forever, your friends, your family, the people you see every day, that we all had access to life extension.
Thank you, Candidate Haywire. We will add 45 seconds to your future speaking segments. Next will be Candidate Kimberly Forsythe. In 3 minutes, what can you do to keep us alive?
Well, as I stated before, I believe that the biggest thing that I can do to help is to rally support for all of the researchers and institutions that are working on this, whether that support be finding them funding, access to computational resources, whether that be just speaking to people in general. I think that rallying behind them and really giving them everything that they need and encouraging cross collaboration is going to give us the fighting chance to come across these technologies in our lifetime. I also believe that by working to implement on the national and international levels more policies that are directed at providing universal access to these technologies is going to be of the utmost importance for us to be able to, like I said, see it in our lifetimes.
Thank you, Candidate Forsythe. We will carry over 172 seconds to your future speaking slots. Next will be Candidate Kristan Harris. What will you do to keep us alive forever? Candidate Harris, I believe you're muted.
It all depends on what your opinion and your, I guess, interpretation of what life is. There's plenty of options out there right now that are being explored. My friend Dennis Kowalski, hometown transhumanist hero, obviously Cryonics Institute, they're doing great work over there. You got Max Moore if you want to do the cryonics things. I mean, there's options to download your consciousness in a computer coming down the corridor. Who knows with things like cloning, if they'll be able to clone your body and put your memories into another body. There's all these options. Look at ancient history. When we look at the Egyptians and Babylonians, they mummified themselves, hoping one day we could take their DNA and bring them back to life. And that's where we're almost at right now. The technology is right around the corner. I think right now it depends on like what form of a life extension do you want to pursue, and how can I offer that for you? I'm going to tell you, there's nothing that you guaranteed in government. First of all, I ain't going to sell you a pipe dream. But there's a lot of great opportunities, and I think that there's a lot of capitalist companies out there investing in these things, and we need to take a look at how they're doing it and the ethics behind it. But also, I think that everyone has the right to live forever if they so choose. If you want to be able to choose how long you live, you should be able to do that. I think that's all about individual liberties and freedoms on what you want to do, and you have the right to do whatever you want to try to pursue life extension. I think that I personally would invest time and research into these different technologies, cryonics, obviously, at what point do you lose your soul, et cetera, when you're downloading your consciousness. These are all debates and ethical debates they have. I think cryonics, it has a great opportunity to take your existing meat suit and keep it forever if you so choose, or bring it back to life when you got a cure. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Nanotech, regenerating your youth. There was an article that came out that people that were taking alchemy or concoction actually biologically lost 2.5 years of age. There's a lot of great health aspects of this, and I think that we can have a charitable free health care through this technology, and we introduce it to people through charity, because charitable healthcare systems will have the ability to take care of people better, cheaper, and more efficient than, let's say, human-run hospitals in the near future. So I think innovation, tax benefits for companies that are investing in these things, that's a good start.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. You have 35 seconds that will be carried over to your future speaking slots. And that concludes question number 3. We move on to question number 4 from Pavel Ilin, who is the secretary of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Those of you who watched the pre-debate show saw his appearance there. He asked, how will you mediate between different groups of interest within transhumanism? How will you have a dialogue between people of different interests, aesthetics, and ethical philosophies? How will you overcome othering and tribalism within transhumanism? And I will add, with regard to that question, the U.S. Transhumanist Party just today launched its Transhuman Quest initiative, whose purpose is to have these kinds of discussions. And indeed, our first topic on the Transhumanist Party Facebook group is this idea of overcoming othering and tribalism. So we are quite interested to hear our candidate's thoughts on this. Candidate John Kerecz, in 3 minutes, how will you overcome othering and tribalism within transhumanism and mediate between different interests?
Well, I think this kind of comes back to how I answered the first question. I think it would be important to get the different representatives from the different groups that have different mindsets, to get them together as much as possible to discuss their different issues so that they can understand each other's directions and where they're coming from. I think getting them to form a consensus of how it should go forward totally depends on having them all understand each other's point of view. So through understanding and through communicating with each other, they can come to some sort of consensus. So I think the trick there is to get them to talk as much as possible and to open the lines of communication and make sure the lines of communication are open. Even if meetings between them became arguments are still communication. So when they have different views and stuff, they have to keep it open. Lines of communication always have to be kept open, even if they don't agree on things. This can be done through many different ways, through meetings, through correspondence. But I think mostly face-to-face meetings would be the best so that they can all keep open to each other's views. That's the only way they're going to understand and come to consensus of what direction they should go all together.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. You have 100 minutes carried over to your future time segments. And next, we will have candidate Holsopple in 3 minutes. How will you mediate between different groups within transhumanism and overcome othering and tribalism?
Well, I have I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but I'm relatively new to transhumanism, and I'd say more so than anyone else. So I come into it with a broad brush. And as far as the different tribes within the thought processes and priorities within the Transhumanist Party, I would rely heavily upon yourself, Gennady, and the other members and officers within the Transhumanist Party to present that platform. I would move forward with what I see as what it takes to run a government and create a peaceful, prosperous society. And I would listen to the Transhumanist Party input, and I would also listen to the Democratic Party input and the Republican Party input and the libertarians. But I wouldn't be the architect of the Transhumanist Party platform. I would run my platform, and I would take advice and counsel from the experts within the Transhumanist Party. And I would, again, rely on the lifelong transhumanists or the recent transhumanists that have something to contribute to the conversation, much like John referred to, is we have the ability to come together with some amazing minds. Harris said the same thing. I'm certainly not the most informed or smartest person in the room, but I would listen to all factions of the party and see if it made sense in a budgetary standpoint that I could advocate for more research and better understanding of certain aspects of the Transhumanist Party. But I would try to make it into a common thread that we all had something in common that we were searching for. And I think there's plenty within the party that we could identify those common issues.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will carry 47 seconds over to your future speaking slots. Next will be candidate Rachel Haywire. In 3 minutes, how will you mediate between different groups within transhumanism and overcome othering and tribalism?
Well, there are a lot of groups in transhumanism. We have the techno-progressives, we have the techno-libertarians, we have some new transhumanist sects with wild ideologies popping up. I personally have dealt with people all over the political spectrum. And what I have found that really unites people is a shared story. Whether that's a song, a really well-written article, or even a well-crafted meme. People can be brought together through a shared story, a shared experience. And when it's no longer about one group versus the other, it's not a tribalistic us versus them fight. That's a hilarious meme. That's an incredible song. That's one of the best articles I've seen this entire week. Then people begin a new dialogue based on a shared interest, a shared story, a shared feeling in which they relate to each other. Because it's no longer about tribalism. It's about sharing a story and an experience. I have dealt with all sorts of political groups, from the far left to the far right and everything in between. And I have seen neo-Nazis and Antifas find common ground because they liked a video that was made by a weird artist in Berlin. And I believe that I can do that in the Transhumanist Party and in America and in the world. I am a unifier of culture through groups that would have no interest in talking to each other, some groups that would want to kill each other. But the minute that I come in with the right song or the right meme, entirely new conversations and worlds are built.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. We will add 49 seconds to your future speaking time. Next, candidate Kimberly Forsythe. You have 3 minutes to discuss how you would help overcome othering and tribalism within transhumanism and mediate among different groups.
Well, I think all three previous candidates have stated it quite well. I definitely emphasize that we are in this under a common vision. We all seek to, even though there are several different factions of the transhumanist movement and how it encompasses several different types of technology and health concerns and things like that. But I think that by listening to each and every single one, sharing their concerns and working our best to overcome objections, and also encouraging each one to pursue what they believe would be a good course of action that would play well to those that also share those beliefs, would definitely be a lot of, bring a lot of a better idea of unity to the various different ideas that exist within it.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. We will add another 172 seconds to your future speaking times. And finally, for question 4, candidate Harris, you have 3 minutes to explain how you will bring more unity to various groups within transhumanism and overcome othering and tribalism.
Well, I don't know. Those are two very separate topics, othering and tribalism. I mean, the United States Transhumanist Party, by definition, is a tribal act. I mean, you're joining a tribe, you're standing behind an ideology. I think it's a tool. It can be used for good or evil. Without competition, how do you find out where you're wrong or where things need to be improved? So I think tribalism can be embraced as a really good thing as long as people aren't using otherism, which is really kind of bringing certain individuals and alienating them. I think othering is kind of one of those things where you're not incorporating everyone's viewpoints, maybe based on your own opinion on someone. I think that bringing people together in general, I mean, I think is very important. Look at something as tribal as sports. Sports brings people together, and it's a very tribal thing. You don't see people going around, for the most part, causing violence, and it brings unity and fraternity. I think that tribalism can be a good thing, and it's not always inherently a bad thing. I think we need to look at what segments of tribalism are causing the issue and discuss maybe different avenues of like incorporating ideas that are popular, but at the same time being rational about those decisions. I think communicating and reaching out to other groups, and obviously, we got Humanity Plus out there, longevity, and there's even more. There's a futurist party. There's a lot of things out there that tie into technology and politics that, libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, constitutionalists, there's all these different ideas out there. To think that one person has the best idea is ridiculous. And I think that through tribalism or competition, that we can actually become a well-oiled machine and kind of perfect this idea of a transhumanist party. I don't think tribalism will ever inherently go away. There's always going to be some tribal aspect of humanity. I think it's built into our DNA. I'm from Wisconsin. We have the Green Bay Packers. It's like the ordained state religion here, So I understand that tribalism can be an issue when we're talking about violence and activism. We'll take a look at our current political climate, Antifa, the Proud Boys, things of that nature. These are discussions that need to be had. I think that we can reach out to anyone. If it benefits the United States Transhumanist Party, we should definitely find out different ways to work with other organizations out there, as well as maybe do things like Kim suggested, working out charitable events. I think these are great ways of growing the Transhumanist Party, and that I've seen in other parties as a person who sat on there. I also think that, it also depends on what the Transhumanist Party stands for. What is our platform committee, or let's say a resolutions committee? What have we all decided that we stand for? And I think that's what it comes down to. Obviously, that all came out today. You can take a look at that. Check out the U.S. Transhumanist Party website, and you can take a look at different platforms that we stand by. So,
thank you, Candidate Harris. I will say that you spoke for the allotted time, and that concludes the discussion on our fourth question. Our fifth question is also from Secretary Pavel Ilin. He asks, how will you communicate with the non-transhumanist population and persuade people to become transhumanists and work with a lower future shock level audience? How will you overcome othering and tribalism within the broader society? So the previous question pertained to mediation, communication, overcoming othering and tribalism within transhumanism, and this question focuses on the broader society. Candidate John Kerecz, you have 3 minutes.
Well, that's a good point. I think with a lot of things in this day and age, you see how technology gets into society and how they accept things. I think a lot of times with technology, you have to kind of ease it into people. And one time they had said about Steve Jobs, they said about how he showed people things that they didn't even know they wanted, but he made them realize they wanted it. So I think this is a very big time when it's important for media and education to show people what it is, to show that it's useful, it's helpful, it will help the quality of their life, and show them that it really won't change their life as much as they think it will. It's best to try and ease things into people and to show them the benefits of it and downplay any part of any side effect it might have or any side problem. I mean, there's always side problems with everything. But I think it's very important for media and how it comes across the population to get it out and educate people and show people, like I said, again, like Steve Jobs says, make them realize about something they might not even know it exists, but make them realize how much they actually do want it and how much they do need it and how it will improve the quality of life. I mean, there's things we do today with technology that we didn't think we'd do, and we thought, why would you want to do that? So that's what you have to get across to people. So I think it does make a big difference with media and education through media, to make people realize the benefit. That's the most important part, to make them realize the benefit of it.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. We will add 80 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have Candidate Charles Holsopple. With regard to the broader society, how will you help persuade people of transhumanist ideas and overcome othering and tribalism?
Yes, I think it starts with education, but just as a point of procedure, when I look at the screen, I don't see myself. I just see the other four candidates. I see myself very small in the top screen. Am I in anyone else's screen represented on the main?
Whole time, Charles. Don't worry about it.
Okay, very good. So I think it's to educate the public in the way that technology impacts and will impact life on the planet and our ability to sustain our economic structure and our social structure. I think the advent of technology as it is taken its hold on how we learn and how we react with each other, it just in the past 5 years has been phenomenal. And I believe the ability to communicate will only get faster and more reliable as we identify things that make sense, things that we agree upon, and using. I think the Transhumanist Party needs to spearhead using technology and science and rational thought to benefit the population as a whole. We have that opportunity. We're not pigeonholed. Most people haven't heard of us. And we have, if we go in with plans that have been well thought out by the party platform, and we are dedicated to what we exposed to, longevity and well-being. If we use those as our mantras, we can attract people that are disenfranchised from the parties as they have come to know them now. So if we have humanity's well-being at our heart, and we have each other in our hearts, we can gain people that are looking for some aspiration or inspiration of how they can contribute back to society. And that's really what we need. We need a widespread support of people that are wanting to make a difference, that want to use their talents. And we need to nourish those souls and those individuals, those bodies, those 7 billion of us, so that we can contribute back and figure out some of these existential threats that are facing us, and come together to face those once we understand what they are and what possible scenarios that each individual community can have. And through, I think we can, John mentioned it, through education and entertainment, we can make different avatars of how people exist in different conditions, and show empathy and the results of technology through creative ways, and introduce these technologies, that are going to become even more fantastic than they are now, and more capable of providing for the benefit of all. If that is our common goal, do we have the will, and are we willing to explore the ways that we can get along better within our own tribes, within our own groups, but what we share in common with those that we have long held that the differences are the major deciding factor in how we get along. I think we need to look at the common demands on the human condition, and the ways that technology is making it more affordable, or can make it more affordable, if we have a common purpose in mind. So we have to identify the existential threats, the opportunities, and come together in ways to bring those about through hope and inspiration.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 4 minutes in response to that question, so that does subtract 60 seconds from your accumulated time, but you had that much time accumulated from prior segments, so you still have a positive balance. Next, Candidate Rachel Haywire, in 3 minutes. How will you communicate with the non-transhumanist population, persuade people to become transhumanists, and overcome othering and tribalism within the broader society?
Well, I think a lot of people are already transhumanists that may not call themselves that. Now, I have a background in marketing, and when I see people going to the gym every day that are also into bulletproof coffee, that are also into smart drugs, they've maybe seen the movie Limitless, and now they're on their own smart drug gym routine. They're biohackers in a sense, enhancing their bodies. They might not know that transhumanism even exists, and we might even call them something like basic bros, but they are going beyond. Now, these people that go to the gym that want to extend the capabilities of their bodies, there's no reason they wouldn't want to extend them even further. And transhumanism is a natural step for them if they're not already there. And my job would simply be to let these people know that they are already on the cusp of transhumanism, whether it's through meeting with them at a sports game, a party, whether it's through going online and talking to them in their forums. I would let them know that transhumanism is already what they're doing. And then I would tell them about the United States Transhumanist Party.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You have 95 seconds added to your future speaking times. And now, candidate Forsythe, on the fifth question, how will you communicate with the non-transhumanist population, persuade people to become transhumanists, and overcome othering and tribalism within the broader society?
Well, as I've stated extensively in the Facebook group, there are many ways that we can help to people help people understand that they deep down do support a lot of the philosophies of transhumanism, whether that is helping them to understand that something as simple as a pacemaker or an insulin pump, as I believe it was Tom brought up, and other people of the group, even this simple smartphone in my hand is an extension of myself that gives me greater powers that I would normally not have without it. So by finding ways that each group can, either group or individual, can relate to it, I do believe that we can overcome a lot of the biases that we are going to face, the initial biases that we will face in talking to people about this. And also, there was the idea of using things like public relations and propaganda for good. A lot of these people have been conditioned to think in a certain way since birth, and that is mostly done by corporations, consumerism, things like that. So if we can utilize some of those same tactics and at the same time wake them up to these tactics that are being used on them, I believe that it is going to help us tremendously in the long run.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. You have 90 seconds that will carry over to your future speaking slots. And next we have candidate Kristan T. With regard to the fifth question, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I believe that there's a lot of different ways we can bridge the gap in transhumanism. That's been obviously an anthem. I was on Detonation with Steele Archer prior, and I talked about how hard it can be to bridge the gap when you're talking to an individual that may be of a different mindset. And it kind of reminds me of jargon. A lot of times when we're tech people, it's very easy for us to understand these things, but the average person cannot relate. It's just, they just don't have the time. They got families. They may be working 2 jobs. They don't have time to have these conversations. And I think that's why it's really important for someone like me be elected, because of the fact that I would be able to bridge the gap not only between conservative viewpoints and transhumanism, but also introduce a lot of these social liberal ideologies that a lot of conservatives are already adopting. Like we talked a little bit about tribalism being good or bad. Tribalism, especially when it comes to party lines and almost a religious aspect, like you go to this church of Republican or Democrat and you do your tithe, you hate the other group. It's really destructive when all reality, it's all about policies. And I think when we reach out to individuals and we want to bridge the gap, we need to talk in different terms a lot of times. And like Kim mentioned, pacemakers, great example. We have robotics, we have drones, drone delivery systems. I can order something from Amazon, have it same day now. There's a lot of aspects of transhumanism and technology we can take advantage of that the general public already is benefiting from. Cryptocurrency. We have 8 cryptocurrency ATMs in the local community. We have all this different technology, and I think a lot of them don't realize that we're already using it. I believe another great way is through obviously entertainment, media, and education. Entertainment always gives you some kind of idea of what's coming down the market as far as smart ideas, as far as transhumanism technology. That's always out there, but education is real important, that we get children hands-on opportunity. I know I talked briefly before the show about education, but it's literally something we can use to get our children ready for the future, whether it is working with automation, fixing self-driving cars, or being on a spaceship and traveling the galaxy far, far beyond. All those things are really not that far off when we start to think about it. We may see it in some of our lifetimes, especially if we're living longer. But I think as far as bridging the gap, communicating, education, media, entertainment, and I think those are all very important points, and giving proper representation. Obviously, with things like transhumanism, it's a double-edged sword. So we want to make sure we give it a positive outlook, that it's not always this dystopian ideology that maybe conservatives more so believe.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. I will say that you were right on time. And thank you all for your thoughtful responses to your 5th question. Our 6th question is also from Secretary Pavel Ilin. As you may have discerned, I consider him a highly insightful individual, and he has provided a lot of input into this debate. So his next question is, how will you reform the healthcare system within the United States in order to ensure and accelerate the arrival of life extension therapies and the accessibility of those therapies? Candidate John Kerecz, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Well, as I said before, I do think healthcare is a very important thing that does need to be revitalized and altered. I very much like other countries where they give health care to their people. I do believe that's important. I've heard the other argument where they call it, people complain because they consider that socialized. But I think healthcare should be available to people. I think it should be we should try to make it that it is not about the companies making money, but about them helping people. I think right now in this country and in the world, period, a lot of drugs that they make available to people aren't always drugs that are really helping the people. It's more about how they can make money off of it. And I think there'd be a way to, if maybe we did socialize the healthcare a little bit more. I mean, there was a time when people didn't like the idea of Social Security because they thought that was being socialist. But if we make it that way, that it's more important for the discoveries and the healing of people than companies being concerned with always making money, I think that's the direction to take it. We want people to get better and get well. Talking about longevity of people, statins for cholesterol is one of the biggest things they push for people right now. But yet research has shown that people that die of dementia and Alzheimer's, sometimes in their brain fluid, have levels 500% less of cholesterol in their brain fluid. Now, is this a product or a cause? I mean, the companies are busy pushing statin for everybody to lower cholesterol, but yet it's shown that people that die of brain deficiencies have less cholesterol. My concern with this is if it's all about the companies making money, not helping people, are they really going to work towards helping people and really work towards longevity? I don't think they want to work towards longevity, but right now the way our health system is, I think they actually want people to be sick so that they can actually make money off it. And that has to be stopped. It has to be moved to a point where we're working towards people living longer. The companies should realize that they can still make money. And if you have somebody that lives 200 years, you can make less money off of them for a longer period of time and still make money. So I think that's my biggest concern. If they're working towards promoting the length of life span of someone, not the fact of making their money right now. I think that'll greatly improve our healthcare.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. We will add 25 seconds to your future speaking times. Next will be candidate Charles Holsopple. You have 3 minutes to discuss how would you reform the healthcare system to ensure the arrival and availability of longevity treatments.
Well, longevity treatments as well as other treatments. I mean, we have to treat the short term and the midterm before we treat the long term. So I'd advocate and I'd say that we need more doctors, we need more physician's assistants, we need more nurses, we need to educate people for jobs that can enhance the well-being of our population. Right now, there's a great restriction on the number of doctors that we can train here, and that keeps our healthcare costs up, and it takes creative minds out of the healthcare industry. We have robotics that are coming into line for both diagnosis and treatment. That is essential in creating a healthier and early diagnostic of problems that would cause us to live a less productive and shorter lifetime. I'd speed the Federal Drug Administration testing of different therapies that are proven to be needed and useful in the safe treatment of disease, and including the aging process. And I think that gets us into patents and intellectual properties that sometimes are restricted by corporations or individuals for the prolonging of both medical procedures as well as that goes into our energy policy and everything else. So I think we need to address those what I would call eminent domain over what affects us, what possibilities that we have to affect the global population's health and well-being. And I think privatization of those discoveries is I'd say immoral in some cases. And John was talking about the overhead of our healthcare system. And the last time I heard, it was about 1/3 of our healthcare dollar goes to administrative cost and insurance costs, and it has nothing to do with the health and well-being of the individuals. So I think we need to look at that. I think some form of socialized medicine, if you will, is warranted and just and a human right to. When we say that we have the inalienable right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, life is dependent upon certain measures of what healthcare and what our environments provides us. And we all live on a very fragile and delicate planet. And the sooner we realize our shared dependence on certain systems and technologies, the better. So I think that we need to bring the private industry in. We need to build a inclusion society to where we all realize that we are in this together, and our tribe is the human race.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 25 seconds over the 3-minute time, so that will adjust your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Rachel Haywire. You have 3 minutes to discuss how you will reform the healthcare system within the United States in order to ensure and accelerate the arrival of life extension therapies and the accessibility of those therapies.
Yes, so a lot of this goes back to my platform. As you guys know, I'm advocating for cryptocurrency healthcare. And one of the reasons is because the current healthcare system that we have is a disaster. We have really terrible insurance companies that barely give people the healthcare they need, if they get any healthcare at all. And we have people that can't get the specialist treatments they need because they're not covered by insurance. my cryptocurrency healthcare plan would give people access to life extension therapies and technologies. They would become accessible through my UBI program, which every citizen being able to live in a comfortable way would have access to use the blockchain to purchase the technology that they wanted for crypto in the medical world. So we're talking cryptocurrency healthcare options while extending life extension technologies. And the more life extension technology is built, the more options that we're going to have on the blockchain in order to optimize these technologies. There is also the part of my platform where we talk about taking psychedelics like LSD and MDMA and classifying them as therapeutic remedies, making it so people that are struggling with depression and PTSD are able to use these substances to get better, to feel better, to extend their lives. And I think that a lot of people that are using these substances would also be interested in life extension therapies and technologies, whether we're talking about cryonics as a backup plan or regenerative medicine. We have so much that we're on the cusp of right now, and it's very important that people get access to these treatments. And we can't let the insurance that we have in America right now be a barrier to that. And that's why we need to come up with new solutions.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You will have 45 seconds carried over to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Kimberly Forsythe with regard to question 6. How will you reform the healthcare system in the United States to ensure the arrival and accessibility of life extension treatments?
Well, I think it is important. One of perhaps the most important aspect of it is to remove profit out of healthcare. To parrot some of the other candidates, what they have said is that the profit in healthcare, while sometimes it does go toward developing new technologies and new drugs, the vast majority of it is simply an abuse of the people. And I believe that this is something that we all understand, we all agree with. I do believe that declaring healthcare a basic human right and forcing that we allow everybody to have access to life-saving treatments, but at the same time we need to really focus on prevention as opposed to just treatments. There are a lot of things that we can do that can help curtail some of the cost involved in making healthcare a basic human right, but we also need to focus more on bringing more technologies into it, such as AI, machine learning, robotics, things like that. I do believe that it's not something really that can be answered in 3 minutes, but I really would love to see this party, all of the members, focus heavily on developing more policies and getting those out into the mainstream, because it is extremely important. Like Charles said, if we don't focus on the near term and the midterm, in helping people to become better, live healthier, and live longer, there's no point in extending their lives if they're going to be miserable.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. You have 68 seconds that will be added to your future speaking times. And finally, for question 6, candidate Kristan Harris, what would you do to reform the U.S. healthcare system to achieve the arrival and availability of life extension treatments?
Well, first of all, I always felt insurance is kind of gambling, whether you're going to get sick or not, and you're buying something based on that. But I think that John was on to something about free healthcare and taking the money out of it. In fact, we used to have that system prior to Medicaid and Medicare. We had charitable hospitals run by the churches and other organizations, which doctors donated 1/3 of their time to maintain their doctrine. And guess what? It didn't put a burden on the taxpayers, and we were considered the pride of the world as far as Medicaid or not medical assistance at the time. So the question is why did we get away from that, and why did we regulate that? and how can we go back to that system to take the burden off the taxpayer dollar? Now, some of that, obviously, when we're talking about socialism and socialist government, I mean, when Obamacare passed, they had less than 30% approval rate in the first 3 months, less than 10,000 people signed up. Maybe it was the first month. 10,000 people signed up. You know how many people are in America? I'm saying that the idea of opening the borders for interstate competitions and intercountry competitions would drive the price down. Just like if you have one cable company in your local neighborhood, you're paying $170 for that package. All of a sudden there's competition, that price goes down. Now with socialism, we don't have that. Everything that we kind of feared and that everyone in the media, as far as the whistleblowers were warning about, jacked up prices, consolidation, getting rid of small companies, that all happened. For the ideology of small companies and small organizations is abundant in things like smart growth and smart planning, but not when it comes to healthcare. And I think it's because it's consolidating the wealth. And when you're consolidating wealth and power amongst a small group of organization of people, it's always socialism and communism that does it the easiest. So I think, in my opinion, that's the best outcome. We have to go back to a capitalist system. Corporatism is a problem. We need to talk about that. But at the same time, I think if you open up competition between state boundaries and maybe even with Canada, these prescription prices all of a sudden will drop, because when it comes down to it, it's about the dollar. And I don't think that's going away unless we move to a charitable system. And that's my opinion. I think people would get better health care, would be able to get the health care they want, and we'd have the choice of whether we want it or not. Now, I'm saying if it sucks if you get hurt and you don't have health care, absolutely. But that's what charitable organizations were for. And it didn't put you in a burden onto the system and to yourself as far as bills go. So that's the way I look at that. And that's what I got for you. But a lot of good ideas up here, by the way. I think that Kim had a great idea, automation. Haywire had some great ideas out there as far as automation and healthcare and different ways to handle it. John, obviously, Charles, everyone contributes different ideas, and it also shows, how we can all work together and improve our ideas. So,
thank you, candidate Harris. We will add 15 seconds to your future speaking times, and thank you to all candidates for your answers to question 6. Now we move on to question 7 from another one of the U.S. Transhumanist Party's members, Mike DeVerde, who has also been active in the chat. This question also relates to healthcare, and Mr. DeVerde asks, would you support increases in funding for the National Institutes of Health to be used for basic research into transhumanist technologies? If so, what federal departments and programs, if any, would you cut simultaneously with those increases to the NIH? And candidate John Kerecz, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Actually, myself personally, what I would like to fund everything with myself is I'm very big on environmental policies, and I believe on trying to move people towards renewables. And I would like to tax a lot of the fossil fuels to use for a lot of my programs, for the healthcare, for education, and the infrastructure. So I would like to tax actually fossil fuels is what I'd mainly like to tax the money on. People can continue to use them, but I wanted to make it harder for them to use it. That money is what I'd want to put towards everything else to help the healthcare, to help the education, to help the infrastructure. I would like to use that in the fossil fuels to deter people from using them.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. We will add 135 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we go on to candidate Holsopple. Would you support increases in funding for the NIH? And if so, what federal departments and programs, if any, would you cut simultaneously? You have 3 minutes.
Well, I'm operating with a lack of information on what the National Institute of Health budget is, as well as all the other budgets within the government. I'm sure that there's a lot of money that's within the National Institute of Health, well, I certainly suspect, that could be reallocated and prioritized to find funding for some of the proven methodologies that the transhumanists are advocating for. I think it needs to be in agreement with the most immediate and urgent needs that we have as a population in relationship to our health. It wouldn't be the number one priority, but if anything shows promise, then I think we do need to fund it, and we need to partner with corporations that are also funding and have the possibility of benefiting from those agreements. We have so many grants that help the pharmaceutical companies and subsidies that we need to get more bang for our dollar with wherever we're spending it. So I would look at the National Institute of Health as a strong organization within our government that we need the best and the brightest minds looking at it to determine what the best way that we need to spend those funds are. It's not just get more money to those issues, it's how those other issues fit in with what we need as a society to bring the security to the people of the United States and the world in relationship to their basic needs. Those advanced technologies I'd certainly be open to. They certainly have a place, but the immediate needs is where I would focus the healthcare dollar.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. We will add 55 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have Candidate Haywire. Would you increase funding to the National Institutes of Health? And if so, what federal departments and programs would you cut simultaneously?
I agree with a lot of what Charles said, especially about how increasing the funding, of course, I support that, but the question is, what is the funding going to? We need to be looking at the specialties involved here, and we need to make sure that the funding is going to the right place and that the people involved are focusing on life extension and regenerative medicine and on extending the human capacities. And it's also very important that we cut programs that are hurting our privacy now. The surveillance state, we have the NSA. They have been violating our privacy for way too long. We have people like Snowden and Assange that have spread the word and taken so much flack for it. And I think we need to cut the spending on these programs drastically. We need to cut military spending. We are in Afghanistan, Iraq, Venezuela, starting this whole Cold War with Russia, which Tulsi Gabbard is speaking out about herself. She's speaking out against it. And I think that these overseas wars are senseless. We need to cut down that military budget too. And also, as you guys know, I'm very against the fact that there are all these people in prison that have done nothing that would make them a predator. They have no victims. These are victimless crimes. And what I'm talking about is sex workers and nonviolent drug offenders, people who have never hurt another human being that are in prison. And I would cut down the prison spending drastically. And I would make sure that this goes into my UBI program. This is all a part of it. And that I make sure that this money that is being cut is going to transhumanist technology. And I would collaborate with the National Institute of Health and similar organizations to ensure these goals.
Thank you, Candidate Haywire. We will add 52 seconds to your future speaking time. Next, we have Candidate Kimberly Forsythe. In 3 minutes, would you increase funding to the NIH? And if so, what federal programs would you cut simultaneously?
At the risk of once again parroting the previous candidates, I think this is all an area that we can agree on to definitely focus on identifying waste and remedying that situation. I do believe that healthcare in all of its forms is extremely important, and it is a focus that we should have in order to overall protect the nation. I mean, it really is a national security threat to have people, most of our population, being completely unable to do a lot of things because of so many health issues. So yes, it is important. Like Charles said, I did not take the time to research that portion of the budget. If you actually look at the United States budget, it's a lot to go into. And I think, again, this is something that any of us would need a lot more than 3 minutes to really focus on. But overall, I agree with them that, yeah, let's look into it. Let's identify waste and remedy that situation.
Thank you, Candidate Forsythe. We will add 105 minutes to your future speaking times. And then finally, for question 7, Candidate Harris, would you increase funding to the NIH? And if so, what federal programs would you cut simultaneously?
Well, again, it depends on what aspects of NIH are we funding. I mean, we're talking about an organization that's controversial and very beneficial. Obviously, on things like there's over 200 different experiments going on with baby fetal tissue and animals and things like that. Those are things that we need to have an ethical debate about. Otherwise, things like nanotech, cures, great aspects of other natural cures and synthetic through DNA printing, which is a big thing I know in the medical industry right now. I think that there's a lot of great things that we can test through NIH, and I think that money shouldn't be restricted based on some bad decisions, but it also shows you the problem of the incestuous relationship between corporations, lobbyism, and government. So I think sometimes that government agencies are less held accountable than, say, a private company. Obviously, private organizations, private farms, they're held accountable. The government farm messes something up, they're rarely held accountable. Government spills oil, rarely accountable. Who holds them accountable? But private companies are. I think that this is something that we could just completely avoid finances for if we invest in the right company to represent and represent these technologies. And I think companies are willing to make money on it, are willing to invest in the investigation in it. Now, should there be some direction? Absolutely. The question is how much do we trust these different capitalistic corporations who are developing cures, and what's their intentions behind it? Obviously, when it comes down to the almighty dollar, we need to ask, how is government improving our life in this aspect? And where's the money going? And I think that's the biggest thing. Unfortunately, on our paycheck, we can't decide what money goes towards what in taxes. It kind of goes towards everything. So, it's one of those things. It can be beneficial. It all depends on what kind of work they're doing and what's the outcome. So.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. We will add 65 seconds to your speaking time. Thank you, everyone, for your answers to question 7. We move on now to question 8, again from Secretary Pavel Ilin. What do you consider to be the best approach to achieve a universal basic income, and why is it the best approach? And this is a good opportunity for you to elaborate your stances on a universal basic income, whatever those stances may be. Candidate John Kerecz, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Well, again, I said where I'd like to take my funding from, of course. Since I'm environmental, I'd like to take it from taxing fossil fuels. But I feel that right now we have a welfare system, we have a Social Security system, and I know I myself am getting ready for retirement. It scares me that they might get rid of Social Security, but yet I think our welfare system and our Social Security system are the two systems we have to revamp and relook at, how we're utilizing the money and how it's going to people, and that whole system should be revamped into a UBI. That way it's not just dealing with a certain person getting money or a certain age getting money, but it's revamped that it looks at everybody getting a UBI throughout life. I'm not sure what that exact amount would be right now. I've heard some numbers that people throw out there. I think it's something that would have to be taken into consideration. But I think the existing systems we have need to be revamped, and that would be the basis of where we went to start our new system for a UBI.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. We will add 120 seconds to your future speaking times. Candidate Charles Holsopple, you have 3 minutes to discuss your thoughts on a universal basic income and why you believe your approach would be the best approach.
Well, it sounds like we fell into my wheelhouse here. The universal basic income that I see is, first we have to identify a universal basic need. And that is back to, I go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I refer to the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 to eradicate suffering, poverty, address healthcare. I think we need common denominators to say what is a healthy existence. And I got started in this whole thing because of Project 222. People know that. And that says that we should have universal right, an inalienable right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, where life is dependent upon measurable amounts of certain materials, and food, water, and shelter is supported by most everybody's understanding. And that's where I came up with the measurable amounts of 2 gallons of clean water, 2,000 nutritional calories, and 200 cubic feet of shelter. Those as those basic elements within what it requires. So a basic income would be different in each area of the country, for each level of existence. So I think we need to create mechanisms that people don't just need money to survive. They know how that money is to be spent, and get a true value for that money within a sustainable society. That with Harris was talking about having the charitable organizations participate, and they certainly are. They spend hundreds of billions of dollars around the world doing good things. And I think we need to unify what those good things are and what's best for society and what's best for the individual. So I think the universal basic income would vary depending on that. The old soup kitchen idea may be the best possible solution if we have hundreds of thousands of people that are refugees at the situation. We need to, or tens of thousands within a natural disaster. We need to identify what those basic human needs are, and the best way to provide for those, to where those members cannot remain on government subsidies, but become with their hopes and dreams, become contributing members back to society.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. We will add 20 seconds to your future speaking times. Now, Candidate Rachel Haywire, you have 3 minutes to discuss your thoughts on a universal basic income and why you think your approach is the best approach.
Well, I think a lot of people watching this might know that I came up with my UBI idea at an Andrew Yang rally in San Francisco after meeting Andrew myself. And I was really happy that he was bringing UBI to the table as a politician, but I remember thinking just $1,000, it's not enough for people to live on. And that's when I decided to double it. And I decided that I wanted to give everybody $2,000 a month. And then I began thinking, what do I not like about society? That's a question a lot of artists ask. And I realized I don't like that people are in jail who have done nothing to hurt anybody. That's sex workers. That's nonviolent drug offenders. Let's get them out of prison. And let's use that money to give $2,000 a month to every citizen. And then I thought, what else don't I like about society? I don't like that we're being spied on. I don't like the NSA taking our data and using it to analyze our patterns to determine what our liberty is and is not. I don't like what the CIA is doing with their Cold War behavior. Let's take money from these organizations. Let's use that to give everybody $2,000 a month. And then I thought about the overseas wars that we have been in. Our troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, Venezuela, the constant talk of going to war with Russia. Everybody's a Russian bot these days. What is this? I don't support this. We should be bringing our troops home, back to America. Let's take the money that's going to overseas wars. Let's take that money and give everybody $2,000 a month. And that's where I came up with my UBI. And I believe that my UBI is the best approach in the party because a lot of people have issues with these organizations that I'm relocating funds from. A lot of people feel this way. We've been feeling this way for a while, and it's time to do something about it. And when you're solving a problem, which I believe my UBI is solving several of, we're not just solving a problem, we are creating a new solution at the same time. We are creating a UBI proposal through solving a problem. We are creating an entirely new form of UBI, and that UBI is my $2,000 a month for every American citizen.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You were right on time with that response. So now we proceed to candidate Kimberly Forsythe. What are your thoughts about a universal basic income, and why is your approach the best approach?
Well, I do believe that universal basic income is very important. However, I believe that it's actually just a bit of a Band-Aid. The biggest reason that this is coming into the political conversation right now is because of automation, job loss through automation. What I believe is more important is that we strive to create a better safety net for the people that doesn't just include a monetary compensation. And through this, I believe that building vertical farms such as aquaponics, aeroponics, hydroponics, all of these different types of farms, and finding ways to work around keeping people in homes. When it comes to all of this job loss and loss of GDP due to automation, it's going to inflate a lot of the prices in America. And when you're giving just $1,000 or $2,000, that's going to go really quickly, no matter where you live, pretty much. So creating other safety nets, the aquaponics, the housing, partnering with real estate companies and construction companies to do things like negative rent. I do believe that these things are going to be a lot more important in the long run to creating an infrastructure that is truly going to help Americans and likely the rest of the world survive through the automation process and not turn us into some type of dystopian, sci-fi movie that we see all the time, where this mega rich elite is sitting there up on top of the clouds, and the rest of us are down here squabbling over just little scraps of meat. So we need to go far, far beyond a UBI.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. We will add 63 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Kristan Harris. What are your thoughts on a universal basic income, and why is your approach the best approach?
Well, I think that the first question I got to ask everyone else on this panel is, where are we going to come up with the money? We're $22.5 trillion in debt. You can't just make this up. It's not going to go away either. When we run out of money, something's going to have to change, and there's going to be some kind of restoration or change in society. It's not going to just fix itself. The debt calculator keeps going up day by day, and there's no way we're making any kind of headway in paying off the state debt. So we're going to pay everyone $2,000 on top of that. I don't think that's a very realistic goal. However, I do believe that a UBI can be accomplished, but I think that before we try that, I think that we should try what our forefathers believed, and that was getting rid of the income tax. I think that we can start there. People who work, they get the discount. It inspires people to work. If you have a UBI, what kind of people are you going to have coming into this country? Are we going to have people that just want to have $2,000 for UBI, or are we going to have innovative, bright minds and the best? These are kind of ethical conversations we need to have. I think that there's room for everyone. But at the same point, I think that the best option, and that would attract people, is if we can get rid of the income tax, which is completely constitutional. And then we need to work on things like taxes on big corporations and capitalism per se. I think that's how our founding fathers originally intended it, that they would, the taxation from the prosperity of business would pay for everything, and that we wouldn't have to be slaves to government. Essentially, when you're paying things and you're getting UBI, does UBI work? Do you get UBI if you don't have a designer baby? Maybe you want to have a baby the old-fashioned way. Maybe your old-fashioned baby is considered a threat because designer baby gets sick based on having a child the old-fashioned way. These are all different kind of conversations that we need to be had. What's the standard then? If I don't want to vaccinate my kids, do I still get UBI? What are the qualifiers? So when it comes to government, it's one of those things. It's like socialism. It sounds great. You're 18, you move out on your own, you fail, you go home, you live with your parents. TV's free, electric's free, rent's free, but it all sounds great until you have that hot girl or that hot date or hot significant other, and you have an 11 o'clock curfew and they want to hang out at 10 o'clock. Then all of a sudden you got to live by the rules that they give you. I think liberty and freedom is the best way. I agree with Haywire on a lot of this conversation here when it comes to things like UBI, the ability to take care of people. But when it comes to UBI, I completely disagree with everyone. Repeal the income tax, give money to the people who are working, inspire people to get jobs. And I don't think automation is the end of jobs at all. I think it's just a new growth and a new beginning. I think that's just one of those fallacies and fear factors that's used to kind of get people to believe a certain way. I think there's plenty of opportunity for growth in business in automation.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. We will add 4 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, thank you to all of you for your answers to question number 8. We will move to question number 9. And here we move into the area of foreign policy. Member Thomas James O'Carroll notes that Donald Trump recently announced that he would create a new branch of the military named the Space Force. The question is, can one nation actively declare sole dominion of space with military force, or should military deployment in space be an international endeavor, and is it even necessary? Candidate John Kerecz, you have 3 minutes.
I actually support the Space Force, although I think it's for a reason that I wouldn't like it to be. I would rather we were going out into space as everybody cooperating with each other. I very much believe in a global society and global commerce, but I am very happy that we have something that is pushing man to space. I believe the Space Force is a form of tribalism. It's a tribalism of the United States wanting to be in space so we can watch what the other countries are doing. I believe that the other countries are going to move out into space also then to better watch what we're doing. So I don't agree with the reasoning of why we're doing it, but I agree with the fact that we're trying to move out into space. But I think it's definitely a show of tribalism. The United States wants to be in space, wants to be able to watch the other countries. Then we're going to have the other countries want to do the exact same thing. I applaud us moving into space. Again, do I like the reasoning of why we're doing it? No. I wish we were doing it for research and doing it for betterment of man, doing it for resources. But I think there's a natural tendency for men to be greedy, to be tribalistic, and I think that's what's getting us out into space. Do I think that eventually it'll lead more to commerce and to trading, to colonization? I do. But at the present, I think it's what we have driving the system. It's a form of tribalism.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. We will add 83 seconds to your future speaking times. Next will be Candidate Holsopple. What are your thoughts on the Space Force and whether it's even necessary?
Well, I don't think a branch of the military being the Space Force is what's necessary. I think we need to understand the capabilities of space and how it impacts what we can impact on Earth from space. But I think space exploration is best as a endeavor of humanity, and it has been up to now, where we have cooperations between governments that have differences on Earth. But when we get up to space, I think we realize just by nature of looking back on the planet that it is a fragile environment that we live in. And we may need to go into space to get resources and materials in future generations, in 100 years or in 200 years. So I think space is an opportunity to express unity among nations and be the highest and most principled interactions that we have. It's space, as I say, I think it's a place for unity and not division. The military is certainly going to have their presence in space, whether we think they do or not. I'm sure that Elon Musk is a wonderful one to have this conversation with more than me. And again, I would go to experts and see what's actually in space, what capabilities are there. I think to really have this conversation, a security clearance to the highest level would be necessary to see what's actually out there. And as president, that would be something that would be a priority of mine, is to look into the national security conditions and the exploration of science that we know as a government. Right now, it's a lot of what we know is hidden from the people, and I think that current administration is adding to that tamping down of information so that we as people can make critical decisions. And with the information that we've got, with the data that we have, we can create real scenarios that I think would be to a better use of our resources if we all understood what challenges we had, both here on Earth first, and then what opportunities we had in space.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will add 10 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Haywire. What are your thoughts on the Space Force and whether it is necessary?
I support it. I think a few of the previous candidates have given answers that pay lip service to globalism, and John was very negative about tribalism. There's been a lot of talk about tribalism in this debate. Tribalism can be really positive, as I said earlier in the Facebook group. Let a million subcultures bloom, and let a million subcultures bloom into outer space. When Elon Musk, who Charles just mentioned, started his work on SpaceX, suddenly we were landing on Mars, and we have people all over that know that we Americans landed on Mars, that we Americans are explorers. We are explorers of outer space. We are a nation of explorers founded on going beyond, like my campaign, going beyond. We are transhumanists. We are about going beyond, and outer space is about going on. So can one nation declare sole domination on space? No, space declares domination on space because space is space. I mean, space dominates being space. Space is beyond any of us. Space is beyond all nations. But let's not turn this into a kumbaya, all nations get together and form a space orgy thing, because that's not what this is about. This is about Donald Trump's space program, and that's here in America.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. We will add 90 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Forsythe. What are your thoughts on the Space Force and whether it is necessary?
Well, it's important to remember that back in 1967, we actually created the International Space Treaty, where we all agreed, well, not all, but I believe it's up to 109 countries or something like that, have ratified and agreed that they would not do things such as placing lasers on the moon, lasers that are capable of destroying cities and things like that. So we already have some infrastructure in place, international infrastructure in place to prevent all-out war in space. Now, that doesn't mean, it's just a treaty, so that doesn't mean that some of the global space powers won't actually break that treaty and go after it. However, Donald Trump is not the first one to create a department that deals with space. And I'm like I said, I'm kind of tired right now. It's 5 a.m. I forget off the top of my head what the department was called, and I do believe that it was disbanded and somehow incorporated into another department. So it's not like it's a brand new thing. I do believe that it is important, but I do believe that it should be on an international and global scale, that we begin to expand out into space, make sure that there won't be any threats from, let's say, a satellite that has a laser mounted on it that's going to, blow up New York City. It is important that we hold these countries accountable for any type of space crime that they, might try to or actually achieve. But going forward, it will be even more important that we have, as we go out and begin to colonize the moon or mine asteroids and things like that. Those space pirates out there, we have to be definitely wary of them. So there you go. That's my stance on that.
Thank you, Candidate Forsythe. We'll add 63 seconds to your future speaking times. And then finally, on this question of the Space Force and whether it is necessary, Candidate Harris, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I guess we're already the policemen of the world. Why not space too, huh? We're going to put red and blue lights on those things and fly around. But in all seriousness, I think that having a space army might be a little bit more imperative than a lot of people understand. A personal friend of mine, Chase Klutchka, is a former master instructor, master trainer of the Department of Defense. She specialized in dealing with UFO cases that were sent to her from the government. And so there's absolutely something going on out there. We don't know whether it's other governments or it could be interstellar, intergalactic, who knows? There's definitely something going on out there. I'm not quite sure what. I'm not fully bought into everything without evidence, but I think that the disclosure hearings in 2017 had some interesting things to say about what's going on. And I think that's something that I think there's a lot of things behind the scenes that we just might not know. I think it's pretty impressive when we take a look at space. You can look in any direction outside of your house at night. Like Kim, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and she goes out, there's trillions of stars. The odds that there's life even more intelligent than what we have on this planet out there is very likely mathematically. In fact, mathematically, it's a lot more sound that this planet was colonized than, let's say, we came from a sludge and from rain on the rocks of billions of years or millions of years or whatever the Darwin ideology is. I think colonization is mathematically more sound and scientific in that aspect. But at the same point, I think that it's a great thing we get out there. I think capitalism might be the first ones out there. Unfortunately, I would love to pollinate the world. I think it's in our human nature to go out there and explore. I'm an explorer. I love ancient history. I love researching different things. I love futurism. I think this is a great, bold, new frontier, and there's a lot of questions and a lot of opportunities for people to work together and develop a utopian-esque future. The question is how do we do it, and how do we deal with anything that might be unethical? All right, Space Army, I say go. I say that colonization should be a priority. I think these are great ideas. I think it's a great answer to the pseudoscience of eugenics. I think those are all wonderful aspects and things we can do.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. We will add 50 seconds to your future speaking times. Thank you, all candidates, for your thoughts on the issue of the Space Force. Next, we will proceed to another question by Mr. O'Carroll, who notes that Donald Trump has become the first U.S. president to step across the South and North Korean border. Some say he is mending rifts, while others say he is failing at keeping peace in specific regions of the world. What would you do to improve international relations across the board with allies and with previously classed adversaries? Candidate John Kerecz, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I do believe that you should be open to meet with any representative from any country. I don't think because of the past histories between our country, you should deny meeting with them. I think as the leader of the United States, you should be willing to meet with every country and anybody. I think you should make a point of that. When you know there's a country that you're having trouble with, you should try to have a sit down with him, maybe a mediated sit down in a location of neutral territory. I do think it was a good move of Mr. Trump to go to North Korea. I've been to South Korea. I know how they view North Korea and the border and the territory there. So I do think that was a good move, but I think there can be more done with all countries. I believe in the concept of the United Nations as a whole. To some extent, I wish the United Nations maybe would have a little more strength. And I know some countries worry about that as them taking away, but we are the United States. And our country is based on different state governments, states and commonwealths, which have different rules, being ruled by a federal government. So I myself do not see a problem with the United Nations being able to mediate and help with the countries more and have maybe a little bit more power and a little more teeth. I mean, we are a country based on having a federal government oversee states. I don't see the problem with the United Nations being more of a mediator and a negotiator between the countries and the issues more than it is today.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. We will add 85 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Holsopple. What are your thoughts on how to improve international relations with both allies and previous adversaries?
Well, I think we have to look at what we do at home in order to really get involved too much in other people's affairs. I think the focus that we should enter into it is human rights should be at the center of our international policy. So and we need, in order to define what human rights are, again, we're back to the platform of my policy, which people would have dignified access to food, water, and shelter. So if that nation had that as an agreement, that leader or the group of leaders thought that their people should have dignified access to food, water, shelter, if they recognize the existential threats that are facing them currently and are projected in their future, I think we should work with them to help develop economies in order to provide for those basic needs. That, again, back to universal basic income, whatever you want to call it, we should take those least among us in some way, provide them with the opportunity to contribute back to society. So meeting with leaders around the world, I think, is imperative in order to solve the bigger issues that we have outside of our borders, which is the health of the planet and the well-being of both the human species and all other species on the planet. So yes, I think dialogue would be a great way to start, but it has to be informed and it has to be firm, and we have to instill our values, maintain our values and our morals as we do that. It can't be just for a financial economic gain, which I think a lot of the current administration is looking at how we can increase our balance sheet and increase our domestic product. And I think we need to redefine what our domestic product is and how we interact with other nations.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will add 45 seconds to your subsequent speaking times. We move now to candidate Rachel Haywire. What are your thoughts on improving international relations, both with allies and previous adversaries?
Well, I want to start by disagreeing with the previous two candidates. I'm a bit of a contrarian. I think UN involvement, that's just too much. Like, let's figure this out ourselves. And what John said, I don't think that that's the right solution. What we need is for leaders to come together in a way that is not some utopian peace treaty, but that is based on a shared initiative that increases the GDP. It's okay if it's about money. Money shouldn't be a taboo. What if it's about increasing the GDP? when I came up with my idea for the Haywire Transgression Initiative, the idea was to meet with world leaders of all persuasions, of all views, of all types of leadership, and to have them assist us in funding the transgressive arts for the purpose of funding visionary technology, merging art and technology together to increase the economic viability of our technology, to have peaceful relationships and negotiations with leaders all over the world. And I believe that all of these world leaders, regardless of what their opinion, regardless of what their views are, can agree that increasing production for their nation is good. And that production can be increased by funding the Haywire Transgression Initiative, which would increase funding to the arts, which would increase funding to technology and to transhumanism. This would be a win-win for all of these nations. We would all win. And that is what I think we want to do. I think that we want to win. That is something all leaders have in common.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. We will add 60 seconds to your future speaking times. We move now to candidate Forsythe. In 3 minutes, what would you do to improve international relations, both allies and previous adversaries?
Well, I do agree with John that it should be a president's one of their main goals to meet with and talk with as many not only allies but adversaries as well, and try to find common ground. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we can all we're trying to create this utopian thing. It's just that striving to reduce the suffering of all people is extremely important. It really is. Now, when leaders come to power, it is often that yes, there are some dictatorships that we will not find common ground with, and you take those on a case-by-case basis. But you also have to look at why it is that some nations despise us. I mean, being an American, we kind of become sealed in our own little bubble and thinking that we are the greatest nation on earth. But when you travel outside and you speak to other people from other countries, and they tell you, what it is that America has done to their country, or what they perceive it to have done, there is definitely some cause for concern there, and things that we need to address. And those reasons can be many and diverse. So I do believe that the UN can be a very useful tool to helping us achieve more dialogue with our current and former adversaries. But like when it came to Trump meeting with Putin and North Korea, I mean, on one hand, I congratulate him. I really do. It's one of the very few things I like about Trump, to be honest. But it's not, as long as it's not in, he's not meeting with them in a way that is going to either undermine the United States or undermine other countries, being there and talking with them, there should be nothing wrong with that. So overall, I do believe that no matter what, we should strive to find common ground and find ways that we can help these other countries. I know a lot of us have heard about the term economic assassin, and that's one of the things we've done to many countries over the years. A lot of false flag operations and things like that. So if we really want to achieve a more productive conversation with adversaries, then we really need to address these things, and I think in some ways really just come clean about it. I'm done.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. You will have 10 seconds added to your future speaking times. And now, on the subject of how to improve international relations with both allies and previous adversaries, candidate Harris, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I have to say I agree with almost all the candidates on here on just about many of the issues that they've brought about with foreign policy. I think that we need to take a look at foreign policy. I don't think we need to be the policeman of the world. I think that we can save almost half of our budget by bringing home majority of the troops. And I think that the military-industrial complex has become very fat over the years. I think that this is probably the most peace we've had in a long time. And I'd have to say that a lot of people may want to argue, but I think this is the most peaceful time in humanity, that we're not killing each other in droves and droves and droves through war. I think that right now is an opportunity for bridge building, and you do that by bringing home the troops. I mean, wasn't it Israel that said they don't need nation building? They build their own nation. Why not bring home the troops? Stop being so predatory as far as policing things and mind our own business. I think that is another thing. It's blowback. Look at things like 9/11, which it recently was 9/11. That was in response to us interfering in foreign policy. We're going to see more and more of that. More we interfere, I mean, the more problems we're going to see. We wouldn't like it if somebody came here and warrantlessly ransacked through homes and rounded up children and did other things under the guise of spreading freedom and liberty. If we're not going to honor our own Constitution here in the United States, we're obviously not spreading the Constitution over there. We're looking at big business gains and what the motives are behind this war. And to Kimberly's point, that's where the false flag thing comes in. When you have military industrial complexes that are hungry for war, what's a couple, lives or a couple, bombs or some event to stir general consensus from the public to go to war? These are real things. It's called propaganda. Operation Mockingbird. It's been going on since the 1970s. And again, it ties into Haywire's whole ideology of the CIA having too much power and surveillance. That's why I'm for a Fourth Amendment right to give us all back our freedom of being able to do whatever we want in the privacy of our home through cloaking. They got technology now that your cell phone conversations, your internet conversation, everything can be private if they so chose, and companies decided to go that way. I think people should be paid for their metadata and rewarded, not being taken advantage of, because obviously that's the new currency. But as far as war goes, it depends if we're talking economic war. I think that obviously economically, the Federal Reserve has devalued the dollar by 99% over the years. I think getting to cryptocurrency and things like sound currency of gold and silver, these are different ways we can actually sustain through this upcoming collapse at $22.5 trillion. In fact, the whole world is in debt. I don't know what nation is in debt right now. So where did all the money go? I'll let you guys decide that. Anyways, I guess that's just it. I bring home the troops, cut the budget in half, start stimulating the economy by not spending and wasting money and fruitless wars. So,
thank you, Candidate Harris. We will subtract 15 seconds from your future speaking times. And thank you all for addressing our foreign policy questions. We now proceed to question 11 from member Mike DeVerde, who writes that in your first term as President of the United States, you may only have one chance at a single signature issue. What will be your main program that you spend your political capital enacting? What current federal departments and programs, if any, will you cut to fund your signature program? So this question asks you to prioritize. And Candidate Kerecz, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I think everybody knows by this time that environmental issues are my biggest thing that I would push. I would probably beef up the power and the strength of EPA. I would probably take some money away from the Army and from our military. I believe, we want longevity, but as people live longer, they're also going to want the environment to be here. I think to some extent, businesses today are worried about quick dollars. I think if they realized that they were going to be around longer, I think they would be more concerned with the environment, because as your lifespan increases, you have to worry about how the Earth's going to be. You want the Earth to be nice for you to live in, for your children to live in. You don't want to be living in domes because you can't breathe the atmosphere or something. So that's just the point. The longer your life is, I think the more we want to make our lives livable and enjoyable. And I think one of the biggest things that brings us enjoyment is the environment. A lot of people like to get out and run in nature, like to see streams, like to see rivers, like to go fishing, like to do things in nature. If we don't make sure that is there for us, what's the point of living a long life or forever if there isn't as much enjoyment there? So to me, the environment is the most important thing to push first, and I would take some money away from the military, along with, as I've said before, I believe heavily in taxing some of the fossil fuels as it is, so that we can gain money and also make it more likely for people not wanting to use the fossil fuels to help our environment.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. We will carry over 80 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we have candidate Holsopple. What would be your signature issue, and what federal programs, if any, would you cut in pursuit of it?
Well, I think education, it has to be up there at the top of the list. And it's not just education of reading and writing, but it's critical thinking, and it's educating as to what threats that we face as society, what's existential threats, and what technologies are to best address them, so that we can actually support them monetarily as well as with our political will and our votes. So I think that the masking of our true problems right now for the benefit of short-term gain is a real thing. The propaganda that is associated with those false equivalencies of either of a zero-sum game. We have the ability to grow our population by many hundreds of millions or billions using technologies in order to feed the population, in order to sustain our water supply, and in order to build shelter. We have the technologies. We have to educate the people that not everyone not everyone can be a glutton, and define what a glutton is when it comes to using our natural resources unwisely. So I think education has to be at the center, and it has to teach us critical thinking, and we have to expose what we've learned through all of this research and governmental inspections of what our true challenges are. And I don't think we talk about that enough, and I don't think our government reflects on that. I think they just go currently looking for the vote. They don't actually try to solve the real and difficult problems. And I think that's where the transhumanist movement comes in, is through science and through technology, we can actually address some of these real and present problems, as well as plan for a more automated and AI-centered economy. So it's and where we would get the funds for that, I think we need to look at every department and look at the efficiencies and how they work together to educate and to inform the public.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will add 25 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we proceed to candidate Haywire. What would be your signature issue, and what federal programs, if any, would you cut in seeking to enact it?
My signature issue is life extension for all humans. It's important that everybody has access to life extension, regardless of their economic standing, regardless of their background, regardless of their level of education, as I talked about earlier. And to make life extension available to all human beings, that would also include my UBI, my transgressive arts initiative. So it all kind of umbrellas under that. Even my public education on transhumanism. It's all about life extension for all human beings, and making it so life extension, it's not some club for the elite. Transhumanism isn't some club for the elite. I think of, like that show, what's it called? The show about the rich people that have only access to life extension. And I don't want to see that. Altered carbon. I don't want to see us live in altered carbon. And the life extension for all is the main issue that I would advocate for that would also be related to the transgressive art funding, my UVI, and even my funding for psychedelics, for therapeutic remedies, because that also makes people live longer. Certain people, they've decided not to kill themselves after doing MDMA, for example. So there's the suicide prevention aspect of life extension there. And as I have talked about before, I'm interested in cutting funding from the NSA, from the CIA, from releasing nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers from prison. Our prison budget is insane. So many people are in prison that shouldn't be. We release all of them, use that money to fund life extension. And then, of course, there is the overseas military adventurism, the globalist imperialism. And I also talk about wanting these restrictions on imperialist global trade. That is also cut into war. This global imperialistic economy is tied into overseas war. It's all connected. So let's stop the imperialistic global trade. Let's stop the overseas wars, and let's focus on life extension for all. Transhumanism is for everybody.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. We will add 35 seconds to your future speaking times. Next, we move to candidate Forsythe. What would be your signature issue, and what federal programs, if any, would you cut in pursuing it?
Well, I do believe that my signature issue would be putting in place the infrastructure to help people through the incoming, future automation. I don't want to say apocalypse because that's so dire sounding. But I do believe that even though some people say that, people are going to be able to transition to other areas, even if automation puts them out of a job, realistically, that's, with a growing population and people who just don't necessarily have the motivation to learn different trades, it's going to be an issue. Now, first off, I got to say my little guy keeps waking up, so I might have to cut this short. But I think that overall, it is important that we prepare ourselves for a lot of the automation displacement that is going to occur. Now, we can say that we are going to cut funding in several different government areas, but we need to realize that with everything that we cut, if we are putting people out of jobs, that's just one more person who we are going to have to figure out where to put them, or how to help them to survive through this. So overall, I do believe automation displacement would be my signature issue. With that, I gotta go check on my little guy. I'll be right back.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. Hopefully you will return in time for your next segment of remarks. In the meantime, we will add 85 seconds to your future speaking time, and we do hope you will get to use it. But for now, we will proceed to candidate Kerecz. What would be your signature issue, and what federal programs, if any, would you cut to pursue it?
I think the first issue here I would focus on is having Kim Forsythe's child talk on this debate next. No, I'm just kidding. But no, honestly, there's about three big things. I can't label it down to one. I think living free through technology. I know a lot of times when we talk ethics and it seems doom and gloom, these are real conversations that had to be had. But trying to curb dependency on centralized currency through the Federal Reserve, through using cryptocurrency, bringing away some of that money. And of course, there's issues and concerns over there, but there's concerns with just about every topic we've been talking about. That's why it's important to have these meeting of the minds and these debates. Obviously, I think healthcare, charitable healthcare, giving tax breaks for companies that are innovative, giving that automated healthcare and ability to have robot doctors take care of people is a great way to touch base with them. Educating our youth, obviously. There's plenty of jobs and opportunity. Think about all the great opportunity and ingenuity for creative minds in the near future. We have no idea what kind of jobs we're going to create. and how many we're going to lose. I mean, obviously, you're going to have the 3D printers in, let's say, a Best Buy or Walmart that's going to print up your case. But who's going to fix the machine that breaks? And who's going to train the guy who fixes it? And how long, and how many machines is he going to be fixing? These are questions. I think jobs are really important, obviously, sustainability. But I believe that, first of all, mostly is focusing on the freedom that technology can bring, whether it's through healthcare, whether it's through your financing and investing in things like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Dashcoin. There's all these ideas out there, and they keep growing. I can't even keep up anymore. It's like the stock market. I think that the idea of cloaking through technology and giving back our privacy in our home, so Alexa isn't spying on us, so we don't have Nest spying on us in our most intimate moments, so we can have a conversation with each other and not have Facebook pop-up ads. I think that should be an option we should all have. I think censorship is an issue. I think people should have the ability whether or not to be censored on social media if it's a public forum. Now, at what point does a public forum require you to give people freedom of speech, as where Twitter says it's a public forum? Is it a public forum or is it a private company, and how are you going to work it? If it's both, let's still adhere to the laws. These are all different things that we need to work on towards our individual freedoms, because without a freedom of speech, well, we can't really defend our Constitution, and that's the only thing that really keeps us away from tyranny. And I think it's really important that that is reintroduced as an important part of our children's education, is knowing what their rights are and how to actually be an activist, how to grow gardens, good education, all these different things, living free through technology. I think DNA printers are wonderful. I think the idea of living forever is a great idea. We got to look at what we can do now and bring it to the public in a way that they can understand, so that they're not too afraid of this great idea of transhumanism. So I appreciate your opportunity. Obviously, all you guys here bring a lot to the table. So thank you for letting me give my input.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. We will subtract 15 seconds from your future speaking times. And now we proceed to question 12 from Thomas James O'Carroll, who is interested in how would you approach the U.S. federal budget and allocate funds among the various functions of government? Would you advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall? Candidate Kerecz, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I would hope to increase funding into the programs I believe we need, but through that also make more jobs and help the economy as it is. Again, I said before about backing the environment and changing us to more renewables and using more technologies and newer technologies. But that in itself will cause jobs to be made for more infrastructure and people to work on those jobs and work. So in some ways, sometimes increased spending does also increase the income back to the people and the jobs available to people. So I believe that some spending will need to be done. Of course, again, like I stated before, I believe in taxing also. I know the Democrats right now, they have the new Green Deal, which I very much like, but they don't believe in taxing the fuels and the fossil fuels, and I do believe in taxing the fossil fuels. So some spending is going to have to be put out to actually reap the rewards, I believe. It'll create more jobs and more people will be working. And you also have to look at where that's going to make additional money and more jobs, like I said. I'd like to put some more money into education. I don't like the fact that the arts, music, arts, even sports, I think are essential for schools to have. I think it's a good growth for the human being. I think art is something that's very unique to human beings, although I do know that you've seen primates, and also I don't know if any of you've seen the films of elephants painting, but some of the other mammals and animals do have an idea of art. But I think art is, to the extent that we can take it, is very important to the human being. It's important to our soul. It's important to our passion. And it's something that I think is unique to us. So I think education has to be further increased, and the arts can't be cut. Some of my policies, too, I believe that people should be guaranteed 2-year degrees. Now, some people argue me, why not more? But I think that's, again, like UBI. It's a basic education you want to make sure they have, to make sure that they are able to work in the new environment where there's new jobs. You know, this country was mostly, the world as a basic, a long time was, first we were hunter-gatherers and then we were farmers. For a long time, we were farmers. people forget that when we went from farming to industry, there was a big shock and everybody was scared of that and they didn't like it. But now that we're getting away from being an industrial nation, again, everybody's scared. But actually, for a long time, we were farmers a lot longer than we were an industrial nation. So we're just moving ahead. And that's the same way I view our healthcare and our longevity and the transhumanism. It's a new step in a new direction, that there might be a fear towards it right now, but it's the growth and how things are going to change. And eventually then people are going to say, when there's the next level, they're going to say, oh my God, we don't want to change from that. So getting back to spending though, I think spending should be spent on the environment to increase it, and then also cause new jobs to be formed, and on education and on healthcare, while also taxing some things to help curve people back towards using better fuels.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. We will subtract 13 seconds from your future time, and then we proceed to Candidate Holsopple with regard to how you would approach the U.S. federal budget and allocate funds among the various functions of government, as well as whether you would advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall.
Well, I've started the end of that. As far as increasing spending, I think in some areas it's certainly necessary that we do so in order to identify and address our existential threats. And that being a prime part of the Transhumanist Party, I think we need to help bring that into the forefront to identify what is urgent and what is necessary in each one of those departments. We're obviously, what are we, $1 trillion or $1.4 trillion in debt this year that we're adding to the budget. We've got lots of places that we're spending we're hemorrhaging money, and it's not actually going back to benefit the people. And I think as a transhumanist party, we need to, I haven't mentioned climate change, but that is a large part of the clock that's ticking, that we have to adjust the way we spend our money, how we spend our money, and how we judge the effectiveness of how we spend our money. When one of the first questions is that people want out of their government, they want security, they want inspiration, they want faith in something larger than themselves that they can work towards, that they can put their labor and their investment in, that will be worth something for them as well as their children and future generations. So the spending, we spent an extra $1 trillion in the bailout in 2008 to save the banks. I think there will be some additional spending that we need to take in order in the humanitarian sector. But again, as Candidate Harris mentions, there's huge opportunity in the private sector, in the philanthropic community, to finance some of these issues, but not just as band-aids of real technological innovation that helps provide food, water, and shelter to the population, so that they have the security of knowing that there is a safety net for them. The people of the Bahamas, the people of Nepal, Mexico City, wherever there's been earthquakes or natural disasters, or the impending tidal or the raise of water due to climate change and the displacement of populations. Those are real and present situations that we're all coming to be aware of, because we all have a phone in our pocket, and we can come up real time and see the reality of the lack of preparation to take care of humanity, and it is demonstrated time and time again. So I would certainly spend money where necessary, and I would look to take the inefficiencies out of every department. The military industrial complex is been mentioned, and it's a great place to start. Wasteful spending, but in every department there's wasteful spending, and I think we need to come together as community and as individuals and as voters to identify where there is opportunity for improvement in the human condition in relationship to the threats that we face jointly.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We will subtract 43 seconds from your future speaking time, and we move on now to candidate Haywire with regard to how you would approach the U.S. federal budget, allocate funds, and whether you would advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall.
Well, I think it depends on the funds. There are some that we should reduce, and there are some that we should grow. I think we should be growing funds that are going to medical research and longevity research. I think we should be growing funds that are going to science exploration, that are going to technology, that are going to space exploration. I think anything related to the arts, of course, anything related to media, anything related to self-expression, anything related to creativity. We should be growing all of these things. And when I say media, I don't necessarily mean a public state form of media. What I mean is private media companies creating independent content. We should be giving them money because we like what they're doing on a national level, not to represent the state, but to help them start their own independent media companies. Talking about letting 1,000 million subcultures bloom and the benefits of tribalism, giving money to entrepreneurs that are working in fields of technology. So it's not necessarily a matter of only growing or only reducing. Obviously, we need to reduce the military spending, and we need to reduce the prison budget, and we need to reduce the money that is going to surveillance, but there is a lot that we need to grow, and that is art, and that is culture, that is outer space, and that is transhumanism.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. We will add 72 seconds to your future speaking time. And now we proceed to candidate Forsythe on the question of the U.S. federal budget, how you would approach it, and whether you would advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall.
You know, the realist in me wants to say, obviously, I agree with everybody. There are going to be areas where we're going to have to increase spending. There are going to be areas where we're going to need to decrease spending. With each and every single one of those, there is a reaction, an action that is going to happen. But you know what? I mean, honestly, who in the world do we even owe? You know, Harris said it. I mean, it's so true too. I mean, I believe many of you understand my position when it comes to money. But who the hell do we owe? And why does this, I mean, even matter? I mean, this idea of money and this idea of spending stuff, honestly, it's such an archaic notion. But like I said, the realist in me understands that overall, as the world continues to grow and as things become less scarce, the idea of money is going to honestly change. It really will. And I think that we are really on the cusp of that. We talk a lot about things like mining asteroids. Okay, that's going to be fantastic, but what is that going to do to the price of gold when we have an abundance of it? What is that going to do to the price of all these different precious metals? You know, and even the astronomical cost of going and transporting those things back and forth, so on and so forth. So I do believe that within the coming decades, our ideas of money are going to completely change. And yes, I could give lip service as to, well, we need to cut this, we need to cut that. But if we cut certain areas, we better be able to handle helping those people transition into other areas, and realizing that as we cut military budgets and as we cut, you know, different areas that the NSA and things like that, those people, they need a place to go. and they need to be able to survive. So how are we going to handle those things? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Candidate Forsythe. We will add 35 seconds to your future speaking time. And now, Candidate Harris, you have the floor with regard to how you would approach the U.S. federal budget and whether you would grow or reduce federal spending overall.
I'm going to use all my extra time up on this one, if that's all right. No, I'm just kidding. I think that obviously it's, in my viewpoint, that more government in most cases equates to less freedom. So I'm a person that understands there has to be a good middle factor between your freedoms and liberties and what government can do. But obviously, I think government's outgrown itself. We can't even afford the government we have right now. I think that there's a lot of pressing concerns out there, but I would definitely shrink the government. I would start by giving back education powers back to local states and communities, mostly because I think that local communities have a better idea of what kind of education their children need other than somebody sitting in Washington, D.C. I think that even one step further, that instead of cookie cutting it for the whole world through something like Common Core curriculum, you could say each child individually needs to be handled differently from each and another child. These are all things that I think that the state would do a better job of. I think government, in the most part, has ruined education, ruined healthcare. Obviously, I think there's a lot of things we could improve, and I think technology can definitely help with a lot of those things. Obviously, we discussed things like economy, but obviously, it's a debate, and there's some things. I'm also a big advocate of being good and kind to our environment, planting trees. I think more so, and a bigger concern than climate change is oxygen levels on this planet. I think that is something that majority of individuals don't talk about. I think it's a more pressing concern. I think when it comes to climate change, there's a lot of things that are yet to be disputed. There hasn't been a real intellectual debate about it. What is causing the climate change? They can't even give you an exact percentage point of what a human beings affect the climate. We do know that the number one contributor to the climate on this planet is the Earth. Or not the Earth, excuse me, the sun. The sun is the number one contributor to heat on this planet and climate change, sun behaviors, things like that. And how much does that impact? How much do we really affect it? And I think it's one of those things where we have to be careful about the incestuous relationship between somebody like Al Gore, who has a house on the beach and stands to make millions of dollars on carbon credits, versus what the real imperative damage is. Because in 2012, according to Al Gore, New York City would be underwater, and we're still doing all right now. In the 1970s, they had global cooling. Whatever happened to global cooling, which snuffed out the Rust, or what they now call the Rust Belt, the working class era. Now we have global warming. Just a few years after global cooling, which is it? Now it's getting warmer and cooler. And at one time in history, we had higher carbon ratings than we do now, and there wasn't automobiles. So there's a lot to answer on how we get these conclusions, what parts of science are involved, and how much we actually as individuals affect it. Now, I believe we should be cleaner environment. I believe recycling is important. I think watching out for pollution is important. I think planting trees. I think Kim's idea on aquaponics is spot on. We need to do more of these kind of things because oxygen is a real deal. Trees and plants need carbon to create oxygen. Is it really a bad thing, or is it a tool we can use to expand on these things on the environment? So that's kind of what I have as far as ethical debate on some of these things. I thought I'd bring it out there. But again, I think that I would shrink government in most cases because a lot of it is wasteful. So, like, for example, welfare, 80% of the money we give for welfare goes to overhead. Charitable organizations could handle that much better and be less wasteful.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. We will subtract 40 seconds from your future speaking time. And thank you to all of the candidates for answering our prepared questions. Now we have reached a stage in the debate where no future time will be accumulated. So you have all accumulated a certain amount of time. You will now only be able to draw down that time with your further responses. And I will give you an overview of where each candidate stands. I will make one procedural note. During two of my remarks, I had given Candidate Forsythe an extra 60 seconds per remark, which I did not intend to do, but she had accumulated an extra 2 minutes, so I'm giving an extra 2 minutes to all of the other candidates as well. And the counts that I'm going to give you are reflective of that. So you each get an extra 120 seconds beyond the time that you had saved up in the course of your remarks. So now candidate Kerecz has 1,015 seconds accumulated. Candidate Holsopple has 256 seconds. Candidate Haywire has 823 seconds. Candidate Forsythe still has the most seconds, 1,058. And candidate Harris has 359 seconds. And we're going to distribute this time as follows. There's going to be one more surprise question, and then we will have essentially an open forum for you to make any statements, rebuttals, elaborations, or concluding remarks to help convince our members to vote for you. Now, first, we will go to our surprise question from Denora Delphine, the U.S. Transhumanist Party Director of Admissions and Public Relations, and she is very much interested in admissions and public relations. So she asks, what are the transhumanist movements and the Transhumanist Party's greatest challenges in preventing growth? So think about what obstacles transhumanism in general and the Transhumanist Party in particular will need to overcome in order to grow to the scale where we can truly affect the world. Candidate Kerecz, you have the floor. Again, any remark will draw down on your time.
Yes, I think it's, again, like I said before when I referred to Steve Jobs, it's making people realize that there's something they need that they didn't think they need. I think the human being ascending to going towards the next level of what we can be should be looked at, and it should be brought to the people as a natural thing, not as an unnatural thing, but as the next evolution of man. Not make them feel that it is something odd, but it's something that's natural and it's the way we should be going, and make them understand this, not bring it out to them as something they can accept, not as something that they might recoil from. And I do think, again, media and how things is presented is a very important part in how you present things to people. They have to realize the benefits of what's being looked at and what's trying to be done. This is something that's trying to be done for the good of mankind, for the good of all of us. And I think they have to realize that. I don't want it has to be brought to them as something not unnatural, but actually natural, as a natural progression of where we're going, and how there's a lot of things today that we do already that they're in this way. I mean, we're already connecting ourselves and implanting different parts and working towards changing ourselves with vitamins, with medicine, with implanting artificial parts. So I think that has to be brought to their attention that it is the natural progression and that it isn't something unreal or unnatural, and that it isn't science fiction, but it's science fact, and it's the direction we're being taken. So media and education is a way to do this and to overcome the resistance that people might naturally have. But all people are always going to have some resistance to something new until they look back and it's like, oh, I can't believe they resisted that back then. I mean, look at even when people went from horses to cars, how there was such a big resistance. We don't see that today, but I think it's just going to be free. Once they see the benefit and they're helped to see the benefit, I don't think there would be as much resistance as you think there might be.
Thank you, Candidate Kerecz. You spoke for 150 seconds. Next, we move on to Candidate Holsopple. What, in your view, are the greatest obstacles and challenges for transhumanism and the Transhumanist Party?
Well, we're really in our infancy of being a political party. Again, I applaud all of the Transhumanist Committee for getting us to this point, Steele Archer for getting us to this point, the two new podcasters that I saw just prior to this, I didn't catch their name, but we are actually getting our message out, slow and painfully, but sure. And through that, the collective minds within the Transhumanist Party now are going to articulate a more meaningful message as these painful processes that we go through individually, trying to reach out and to do essentially what is needed, and that's get the discussion started on what it's going to take to enhance the well-being of the human condition and ensure its longevity. So there's no magic bullet to getting the message out there, but if there was a magic bullet, I think I would call it technology and the ability to become mainstream in what issues we take up, and as the media starts talking about certain topics, we need to be current and have a voice within that conversation, something that encourages the use of technology to address those problems that, back to John's, the car, the problem was getting from point A to point B. And as soon as you can demonstrate that you can do that more efficiently, and it's actually less work, it's less time, then people will buy into what we're selling. But unless we come and bring something new to the table, something that unifies people, and I can't help but go back to what is urgent and what's necessary and what we all have in common, and that's living on a healthy planet within a society that we feel safe and secure in. And that's what we have to do as a transhumanist society is to identify possibilities on different ways to exist on the planet, different ways to work, different ways to use our recreation, different ways to eat, different ways to educate, that we don't have a negative impact on those around us and the planet as a whole. And I do believe that we are having an impact, a negative impact on our environment, and ultimately on the climate is changing, and we have to make ways to adapt to that. And using those housing technologies that go up quickly, go up affordably, and can be maintained and serve the individual as well as the society. So we have to show our competence in looking at the problem as a whole, as a systemic problem, and show ways to pick away at it and use our successes where we do have them, and where our best points of argument are. We need to get it out into the media platforms. And we've got a long way to go, but I think working together, we're going to get a lot farther along than some other parties that just want to maintain the status quo.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 236 seconds. Next, we proceed to candidate Haywire. What are the major challenges and obstacles facing both transhumanism and the U.S. Transhumanist Party?
The lack of media attention definitely stands out to me. Throughout my campaign, I got some coverage at a biohacking website. I went on my friend Robert's podcast, The Stark Truth. I went on the Ocelli Underground podcast, and it was nice to have these opportunities. But I think about the wider media attention of transhumanism. People mostly just ask me about Elon Musk. And I think a lot of that is the image of transhumanism. A lot of people, they just seem to want to turn the United States Transhumanist Party into a public health party. And I think that that's the wrong idea. While longevity is extremely important, and we should be deeply focusing on that, we need to let people know that we're not just another fish in the sea of public health, that we're focused on science, that we're focused on technology, deep technology, algorithms, machine learning, neuroengineering, Neuralink, that we're focused on art, that we're focused on music, that we're focused on culture. Let people know that we're not just a fish in the sea of public health, that we are a technological movement, that we are on the vanguard of a new evolution that is about technology and culture. And You know, when Zoltan Ispan was on the Joe Rogan show 5 years ago, people became aware of Zoltan and people became aware of transhumanism. And I myself would like to go on Rogan in the next couple of years. And I would like to talk to Joe Rogan about transhumanism. I would like to talk to Joe Rogan about the transgressive arts. I would like to talk to him about cybernetic enhancements. I would like to talk to him about biohacking. And I would like to talk to him about neuroengineering. I would like to sit down with Rogan and let him know what's going on in the transhumanist movement and in the United States Transhumanist Party. And it's time for us to get the mainstream attention that we've been looking for, instead of trying to play it like some PC health group. Let's play it like the transhumanists that we are. Let's move people, right? We're leaders. What do leaders do? Leaders move people. Leaders lead people to a new place. Leaders inspire. What we should be doing as a party is inspiring people. And we should be getting media attention through inspiring people and telling them what transhumanism is about.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 143 seconds. Now we move on to candidate Forsythe. What are the major challenges and obstacles facing transhumanism as a whole and the U.S. Transhuman Party?
Well, as a whole, I do believe that we need to understand and kind of come outside of our first world bubble to understand the concerns of the second and third worlds. Inside the first world bubble, we're going to have a lot of biases and, just things that people have learned from birth that we will need to overcome. Many of those biases, they will work against us. But some of them we can make work for us. Now, when it comes to the second and third world, I think that we really need to understand that they are in a completely different mindset. And an understanding of where technology is right now and where it is headed. So focusing a lot of education there would be extremely helpful, and having international ambassadors would be a tremendous asset to the movement as a whole. Now, when it comes back to the United States, I do believe that media can help quite a bit, but that it also in some ways hinders us, because a lot of the media industry is focused on fear mongering for the sake of profit, because fear and things like that is really what gets people into the movie theaters. It's what gets them ordering on pay-per-view and all that good stuff. So we need to be very diligent in making sure that people understand that it is for the betterment of not only themselves, but humanity as a whole. Now, when it comes to the idea of getting lost in the sea of public health, I think it's important for us also to remember that transhumanism is actually, a lot of it is focused on different aspects of health, whether it be super longevity or whether it be prosthetics or transplants and things like that. A good portion of it focuses on health. Even Neuralink, that implant going into your brain, you have to understand that has to be done in a healthy way. So again, just to reiterate, a lot of biases that we're going to have to overcome. A lot of the science fiction, dystopian fantasies that a lot of people kind of have really settled into their brains. And I think that through positive PR, through making them click with it a little bit better, find ways that they can relate to it better on a more current and humanistic level, then I think that will be great for us in the long run.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. You spoke for 177 seconds. And now we move on to candidate Kristan Harris. What are your thoughts on the major obstacles facing both transhumanism as a whole and the U.S. Transhumanism Party, the U.S. Transhumanist Party?
I have to agree with Kim a lot on this one. I think prejudice is a big issue. It can be, and I think honestly, as a person that's come from an outsider joining the USTP, it's been one of the most accepting parties out there. People were really happy to conversate and get alternative viewpoints. I think that's really important. But I think the idea of a collective group of outsiders coming in, that we don't know what we're going to get. Is this the direction we want to go? How are they going to represent us? And I think when it comes to these kind of things, we got to look at the absolute amount of individual liberties and freedoms that we can give people to obviously be themselves, but at the same point, make sure that we get the party in the direction that is in the most beneficial for our freedoms and liberties overall. That's why I talk about things like metadata collection. And Kim's absolutely right. Fear is a big tool. That's why we have global warming fear. That's why we have war fear. That's why we have, $22.5 trillion in debt fear. But some of these things are relevant issues at times. And we have to ask, obviously, we're $22.5 trillion in debt. What are we going to do about that? I think different viewpoints and then understanding how to deal with different viewpoints and how to deal with outsiders within a party, I think that's going to be the hardest part with growing the party. And it's kind of like one of those things I said on the Detonation show with Steele Archer is I grew up in church. And, people would complain that there's cigarettes laying outside of the church all the time. And I'm like, well, what kind of people do you want here? It's just the type of people that should be here. And I think that's just it when it comes to having a balanced conversation and debate, having a good mix of individuals that are conservative-minded, liberal-minded, independent-minded, extreme right, extreme left, obviously within reason, in a respectful fashion. I think it's good to incorporate all these people in the debate. At least sometimes you can get a grain of sand out of it. It's like reading a book, sometimes you read a book to get one or two takeaways out of it. And I think it's one of those things where everyone can contribute and we need to be all accepting. It can't be just coexist as long as you agree with me and you don't wear a MAGA hat. I think it's one of those things where we need to be all incorporating. And if you want to really expedite the ideology of transhumanism, we really need to reach out to the conservative crowd because majority of Americans, believe it or not, they associate with conservatism, with saving money, of the idea of being able to, not be on a welfare and being free, because once you're on there, believe it or not, it's a burden to yourself and to other people, maybe mentally, maybe physically. Who knows? There's all these different aspects we can talk about. But I think that overall, prejudice is a big deal, and that I think the Transhumanist Party does handle it very well, but I think as it grows, it's going to become a bigger issue within the party, and the only way we can deal with it is really open with, accept people with open arms, make sure that there's some kind of stipulations for joining, and making sure we, get rid of, not get rid of the trolls, but, the people who want to be here that should be here, not people who are here just to disrupt, so.
Thank you, Candidate Harris. You spoke for 188 seconds, and I suppose this is relevant to bring up at this point in time. You see this? This is the space police. Space police was a subject of discussion.
The Trump space police? Is that the Donald Trump spaceship there? He's going to hand out space tickets and take you to space jail, where you'll be working on an asteroid for a big corporation, and they're going to have prison mandates that you need to have at least 100 people on the planet working at all times for the prison. Otherwise, they're going to shut it down.
Well, this is the Stolyarov space police. In fact, it is my own design of spaceship, but I wanted to bring this up because you mentioned also policing the trolls a bit, and I see that as one of my responsibilities as chairman. Hopefully I will do the policing in a space age manner, but thank you, Candidate Harris. You spoke for 188 seconds on the main question. So now, before we enter into the open comment period by the candidate, essentially, I will let you know where you each stand. Candidate Kerecz, you have 882 seconds. Candidate Holsopple, you have 20 seconds. Candidate Haywire, you have 680 seconds. Candidate Forsythe, you have 881 seconds. And Candidate Harris, you have 171 seconds. The way this will work is we will go through each of the candidates in their speaking order, and each candidate may use as much or as little of their allotted time as possible. You are not obligated to use all of your accumulated time. If you choose not to use any of that, that is entirely at your discretion. However, we will continue going through the rotation essentially until either all of the candidates have run out of time or until each candidate essentially decides that they have said what they intended to say. So, candidate Kerecz, we will begin with you. Any thoughts you have regarding this debate, any elaborations, rebuttals, or ideas as to why our members should support our candidate?
Well, I just want to restate that basically what I'm looking at is a three-pronged thing. I believe in education, in health, and also in the environment. And I believe in technology as something that branches into everything. I had originally, back in the 90s, switched from doing engineering work into doing computer work. And I had gotten a computer degree back way in the early 80s when you did key punching. So it's funny to know where you punch the cards and how things have changed. But I view technology as something that branches into everything and every way of life and every piece of life, and it will continue to branch into that. And it is just a facet of it that's going to grow and become part of it and more a part of our lives. But I'd like to say, as far as this campaign and as far as the Transhumanistic Party, no matter who wins the candidacy, I'm here for unity and believe in supporting whoever it is and being there to help whoever it is that's chosen, myself or anybody else. And that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, candidate Kerecz. You spoke for 65 seconds. Now, candidate Holsopple, you have 20 seconds remaining, so consider these to be your concluding remarks. What would you like to say to our viewers in 20 seconds?
I think the best way to get an idea of where I'm coming from is go to the website, project222.org, read through the mission, the values, and it'll give you a really good idea of where I'm coming from. And also globalshelterproject.blogspot.com will also give you some history. That's about 22 seconds, I believe.
Yes, that is about 22 seconds. Thank you, candidate Holsopple. I will waive the 2 seconds. Now, candidate Haywire, you may proceed with your remarks.
Well, I'm really happy to be a part of this debate and this party. And I will say we are not just transhumanists. We are of a new evolution. Everybody here today and everybody that is watching this, even the trolls, who are participating in your criticism, which is helping us evolve as a party. And when I began running this race, it was a culture candidate that I decided to run as a populist. But through this race, I have interacted with people who were counterculture, anti-culture, elitist, anti-elitist, all sorts of people. And I was able to find a lot of common ground with anybody that was able to entertain interesting ideas. And I think what's really going to bring us into the future is ideas. These ideas are going to come from websites of mine like Trigger Warning, which bring people freedom of speech and thought. They're going to come from new media efforts that we are making to spread transhumanism to the mainstream. They're going to come from the funding of the transgressive arts, from making transhumanism publicly an education issue. They're going to come from creative people on the frontier of thought, on the frontier of human evolution, who are using art and technology and culture to build a new species, to create the Ubermensch, the Homo superior, human 2.0. That's us. That's what we are. We're the Transhumanist Party. And I remember a critic of mine, who's also a friend of mine, of course, his name was David Kelly. And earlier during this campaign season, you know what he said? He said there were certain candidates who wanted to turn this party into a rave. And I couldn't help but think he was referring to me. And you know what I thought? I thought, here's the thing about raves. People show up to them. Lots of people show up to raves because you have people at these raves dancing to innovative music and having a great time hanging out with their friends. When they're not dancing, they're talking about ideas, they're talking about philosophy, they're talking about evolution. So if that was supposed to be a criticism, I think it's a compliment. Maybe what the Transhumanist Party needs is a rave. It needs more festivals like the Extreme Futurist Fest, where we bring creative people together with people in the sciences, with people in the high sciences, people that are working on machine learning, people that are working on virtual reality, people, whether they're working at Google, whether they're working in their basement, or whether they're working at a Silicon Valley startup, or even a media company in New York that just adopted the latest version of some app. We need these people in our ranks, in our party, and I am a strong leader. I'm not going to say that I have a leaderless strategy. I'm not going to claim to be some globalist utopian, but I am going to claim that I am bold and honest, and that I move people. And I'm going to move people beyond the center, beyond this left-right center dichotomy, into a new political position entirely. Transhumanism is a new political position, and that position is what I want to bring people here into this party. We are going to go forward. We are going to go beyond the center, and we are going to go all the way.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 225 seconds. And now we proceed to candidate Forsythe. What remarks do you have to share with us?
Well, I will say that I think that it is rather disappointing that at this point we still kind of have to play by the rules. And in selecting just one person, you know, I would love to see, what is it? We have 1,800 members currently. I believe that those 1,600 or 1,800 voices out there doing what they do best is going to achieve more than any one of us can individually, even if we are getting input from the entire party. So I want to, overall, I want to see more people out there doing their thing, and rising up to be a voice for whatever it is, in whatever way they want to put the transhumanist ideals. I want you to go out there and I want you to do that. It's kind of sad that we have this Highlander. I keep thinking this is like really like Highlander, you know, in the end there can be only one. And, you know, I don't think that it should be that way. That's really overall what I think out of all of this, even in all of my campaign. And, you know, if I win, fantastic. I will do my absolute best to be a good, you know, a good voice for the party and for the movement as a whole. If I lose, then fantastic. I'm going to continue doing what I can to advance the movement, whether that be, you know, hopefully with this project in Estonia. I will find out tomorrow now whether or not that is accepted. And if it is, great. I will continue working on that. I will continue writing articles. I'm reverberating there a little bit. I'm not so great at videos, but I will continue, you know, doing the rest. And that's what I want to see a lot more of everybody doing. That's it.
Thank you, candidate Forsythe. You spoke for 132 seconds. And now we proceed to candidate Harris. What remarks do you have to share with us?
Well, I think this is a very important time, especially for people in the United States Transhumanist Party, because technology is advancing. And in 4 years, a lot of these ethical debates may be too far, or they might be too far past as far as what technology has come to where the laws are. Look at things like metadata collection, facial recognition, citizen rankings. These are all different things where you can see where the law is getting completely out of hand, and technology is advanced before the laws can catch up or people can voice their concerns. I think obviously if you're looking at a candidate that's there for liberty and freedom, to give you the most freedom that you can get and the best opportunity, I think, in my opinion, that would be me, Kristan T. Harris. You can check out my website, KristanTHarris.com. I'd always say be wary of people who talk about communism or fully automated luxury communism. We had a candidate that's on in this debate, was Ben Zion. He was talking about fully automated communism, but he's a great activist, by the way. Does a lot of work, reaches out to a lot of people. I've done a lot of that. I've had hundreds of interviews, some of them the smartest in tech and science and in different aspects. He's on the right path. I just don't think that as far as what we're looking at, that it's substantial and the qualifications as far as experience going, dealing with Washington and the media. I think that we have a bunch of great people and people will get there. I think there's candidates that will have that ability or have that potential now. I just think that right now I'm the best man for that job. And maybe I come out as a little intense. It's not that I'm intense. I just think that a lot of these things need to be brought up. I am a person that wants to see utopia and heaven on earth. I want to see the, Starship Enterprise and us having, particle things that can make us food and have them beamed and holographic technology in our house through holoportation. I want to see all that stuff. I think it's great. I think it's a great opportunity. But the question is at what cost and how do we, what's the proper road? Are we going to give 100% control to government, end up with near 100% taxes with UBI, or do you want to keep your money and decide how you spend it without somebody telling you how to do it? Do you want to still be able to get in your car and drive and have freedom, or do you want to just be able to get in a self-driving car? I think there's room for both, but at the same time, the last freedom I have is getting in my car and driving somewhere. Imagine if you have what happens if you have a warrant for your arrest? Self-driving car might take you to the cop shop. It's all these questions. I'm the person for the debate. I would love to be there regardless of what happens. I plan to stay involved and definitely, hopefully, be part of some kind of ethics organization with transhumanism. I'm always looking for different opportunities and ways to contribute, and I think that a great group of people to have a debate on. I'm glad that we can share so many different viewpoints, but I'm going to go with the full proven idea that, hey, liberty and freedom, everyone else is doing communism and socialism. Let them have their dystopia. Let's do it right and be a light to the world and show them what freedom and liberty can bring about as far as innovation. So that's all I got for you. KristanTHarris.com. Obviously, check out the United States Transhumanism Party's website as well. So,
thank you, Candidate Harris, and you did use up all of your allotted time. So now we are left with three candidates who have any accumulated time remaining. Candidate Kerecz has 817 seconds. Candidate Haywire has 455 seconds. And Candidate Forsythe has 749 seconds. So we will go through the rotation unless any given candidate believes that he or she is finished, then you have that prerogative. But Candidate Kerecz, the floor is yours for anything else you wish to say.
Not really much. Later this week, I would like to make available to everybody my autobiography that's out there so you can get to know a little bit more about me and things that I've done in my life. I'm going to give that to people free. It's not a sale thing. I'm not selling it. I'll make that available so you can learn more about myself. Again, I'm here for striving for the unity. I'm going to work with whoever is chosen and hope that we can grow and be the future. And that's all I really have to say.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Kerecz, and we will look forward to your autobiography next week. It should be quite fascinating. Next, we have Candidate Haywire. You have the floor.
I'm going to take a cue from John, plug my book. It's called The New Art Right. It is out on Manicore Press, and you can get a copy on Amazon. It's a book of political and cultural essays, and there's also some fun transhumanist sci-fi fiction in there. You can also check out my website, triggerwarning.us. That is triggerwarning.us. I want to echo Kristan Harris's statements. We don't need fully automated luxury communism. To be clear, fully automated luxury communism was a joke. It was just an inside joke that some communists made up on a message board. It's absolutely absurd to turn that into a policy. The whole idea was to make fun of bourgeois communists. That's why it was called fully automated luxury communism. It was a prank to make fun of fancy yuppies who talked about communism all the time. So I definitely don't think that that is what we need in any shape or form. What we need is individual sovereignty. And what we need is creativity. And what we need is vision. What we need is strong leadership. And what we need is passion. We need humanity, and we need emotion, and we need life. We need a human life. We need something beyond humanity. We need transhumanism. Vote for me if you would like to go beyond.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. And you mentioned your book, The New Art Right, which is most certainly a piece of literature that people should consult if they would like to know more about your views, your aesthetic philosophy, and more generally, your outlook on the world. So we appreciate your time in this debate and your remarks. Now we have candidate Kimberly Forsythe. You essentially have the floor for as long as you reasonably wish to have it, given the time that you accumulate.
Well, I'm not going to try to filibuster anything. We've all been here for quite a long time. So I appreciate everybody's remarks and comments. And it was me, just so you know, Mr. Harris, that is promoting the fully automated luxury communism idea. But whatever you want to call it, whether it's resource-based economy, the Venus Project, the Zeitgeist movement, I do believe that it is the future. And just because we're not going to have it right now does not mean that we won't have something, we won't be stepping into something very similar very soon. So with that, I do support 100% the Zeitgeist movement and fully automated, whatever you want to call it. We could even come up with another different name for it. But those ideals are what I support 100%. And with that, I have no plugs unless you want to check me out on Medium or Facebook. Come chat, say hi. Yeah, that's it for me.
Yes, thank you very much, candidate Forsythe. And you do have your proposal for promoting life extension, which is currently pending review by the government of Estonia. So best wishes on that. And I would like to extend my thanks to all 5 of the candidates today. I think you did an outstanding job tackling a wide range of both policy issues and questions about yourselves as candidates. I believe thus far, out of all of the debates that the U.S. Transhumanist Party has held, this was the best. And hopefully we will also have a debate of the same caliber on Tuesday, September 17th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, when we will have our 4 remaining candidates, Yohanan Ben-Zion, Jonathan Shatke, Matt Taylor, and Vrilon, debating. They will receive the same questions in the same format. We hope to have great responses from them as well. And we hope that our audience members really saw today the spectrum of transhumanist policy thinking. There are certainly some differences among each of the candidates, but there are also some deep similarities. And we saw both of those on display today. And we saw a path for the potential unification of all of those perspectives going forward as the election is concluded. We have some great ideas from each of you. And we believe that all of these ideas are going to be integral to the future of humanity. So thank you very much to all of the candidates. Thank you to all of our audience. And thank you to Steele Archer of the Detonation Show for hosting this historic debate. Thank you to Lev and Jules for the pre-debate show. Thank you for all of our guests who attended. I believe this was an excellent demonstration of what transhumanists stand for. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful evening, and I will see our audience members, hopefully, next Tuesday, September 17th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best to all.
Great job hosting, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janati.
Great job, Janati. Great job, everybody. I will say I love it.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah. Go get some party members.
At Haywire's rave, right? Not that kind of party?
Welcome to the party. You know my slogan, right? Yeah.
Transhumanist-party.org/membership. Sign up for membership. It is free. If you sign up by September 21st, you will be eligible to vote in our electronic primary that begins on September 27th.